Representative Kennedy.
Present.
Representative Knight. Representative McGaw.
Here.
Representative Nardone.
Present.
Representative Newberry.
Here.
Representative Shawcross-Smith.
Present.
Representative Tansey.
Present.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. Welcome to the House Committee on State Government and Elections. I want to apologize to everybody for the delay in getting started. We had to wait for Capitol TV, and they were reading resolutions on the floor, so I do apologize for the delay. The first thing that we are going to do is a procedural vote on the bills that are on the calendar tonight to hold them for further study. Madam Clerk, I would propose that we hold House Bills 7032, 7213, 7217, 7218, and 7256 for further study. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Representative Ackerman and First Vice Chair Messier. Madam Clerk, can you have a roll call vote, please?
Chairman Shanley.
Yes.
First Vice Chair Messier.
Yes.
Second Vice Chair Corvasi. Representative Ackerman.
Yes.
Representative Agello. Representative Baginski.
Yes.
Representative Felix. Representative Hull. Representative Kennedy.
Yes.
Representative Knight. Representative McGaw.
Yes.
Representative Nardone.
No.
Representative Newberry.
No.
Representative Shawcross-Smith.
Yes.
Representative Tansey.
Yes.
The ayes have it.
And
Thank you.
Madam Clerk, I'm voting no in my ex officio capacity, please.
Thank you.
Madam Clerk, can you record the votes of Second Vice Chair Corvasi walking into the room now?
So noted.
We're just starting. So tonight, the vast majority of you here are here to testify regarding the state of emergency bills. So the procedure that we're going to go through tonight is there are two bills that are not relating to the state of emergency that only have one witness each. So we're going to hear those bills first to get them out of the way, and then we're going to move to in-person testimony from people here to testify regarding bills concerning the state of emergency from Speaker Sicarchi and Representative Place. We're going to ask everybody to try to limit your testimony to 1 minute. We have hundreds of people signed up, and we're going to try and get to everybody. We are also going to try to not cut people off, but in order to get everybody's testimony in, we are going to have to do a time limit on the testimony. So we'd ask you to consolidate what you're saying. And in reviewing the list in terms of people who have signed up to testify on these bills, the vast majority of people have signed up in opposition to continuing the state of emergency. So at a certain point, it's probably going to get a little repetitive. So try and focus your testimony on something that is unique or what your perspective is, to add something a little bit different to the discussion if you can. And if you find that your point has already been made, you're also fine to say that you don't want to come up and testify if you change your mind. You can let one of the clerks know. A few other ground rules. We would ask that you wear a mask while you are in the room. If you are testifying at the microphone, you can remove the mask, but we would ask that you wear a mask pursuant to the current rules in place at the State House. And we also ask that you, if you have signs, that you do not hold them up during the committee hearing. So with that said, the first two bills that we're going to look at are House Bill 7032 from Floor Manager Edwards. Floor Manager Edwards, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chairman, members of the committee. Fortunately, this is a very, very quick and succinct piece of legislation from the East Bay. What this bill will do is allow people who win the lottery in the state of Rhode Island to remain anonymous. There are ways that you can legally and technically do it now, but this would put it into general law that anyone who wins the jackpot in Rhode Island would be able to remain anonymous and not have to deal with the numerous requests they would obviously be receiving for funds from everyone who is now their friend or uncle. I have one witness, and I will turn the floor over to him. In the interim, there are 6 other states that already use this law: Maryland, Delaware, Kansas, and North Dakota, and there's one other one that escapes me. But this is a great piece of legislation, and I urge your consideration when the time comes. Thank you.
Any questions for Floor Manager Edwards? Mr. Vidkovich.
Thank you, Chairman. My name is John Couch. I live in Portsmouth. I like my house. I like Portsmouth. I love Rhode Island. If I should be so lucky as to win a lottery, I'd like that option to remain anonymous. It could be an option. If somebody from the state of Rhode Island wants to stand up, you can stand up and say, hey, look, I won, if you want to.
Mr. Chairman?
If I want to be... Microphone.
How's that? Better? I'm sorry.
Thank you.
John from Portsmouth, thank you. I want an anonymous bill for the state of Rhode Island. Most states are 5 or 6 degrees of separation. We know that Rhode Island is maybe 1 degree of separation. You know what I'm talking about. It's just smart. 3 years ago, there was a $1.5 billion lottery claimed in South Carolina. That's the state that Representative Edwards could not remember. It is anonymous. The woman up in New Hampshire that won a $500 million Powerball years ago, she actually signed her ticket, and then she found out that she liked her house, she liked her family, she liked her friends. And something else that was pointed out by a good friend of mine yesterday, the cyber threat of my name, your name, our names being out there saying that we won a big lottery, and the cyber attack. So I think it's an option. That's it. It's not going to in any way, shape, or form erode the integrity of the lottery system. Other states have it. I have to just tell you this quick story. July 3rd, 2004, I lost my wallet in Long Island Sound. 100 feet of water, 45 minutes between New London, Connecticut, and Orient Point. What's the odds of me getting my wallet back? 119 days later, a trawler dragging a line with some kids from the American School of the Deaf, a 4-foot net, scooped my wallet up out of 100 feet of water in 20 minutes. So the odds were, a nuclear physicist at Yale did this. He said, John, the odds of that happening are, do you play golf? I said, no, but I know the game. He says, 18 games of golf, each game of golf consisting of 18 holes, and you hitting a hole-in-one on all 324 holes. So for the golfers in the room, you know how hard that is, okay? And I'm just saying that if that can happen, I might be able to win a lottery. And by the way, I do support the Rhode Island Lottery. I looked at their revenue that they create for the state of Rhode Island, and they're very good at what they do, all right? And I do believe that this would be an opportunity for more people that enjoy supporting the lottery to play better and not have to worry about being outed. I'll take any questions from the members of the committee.
Any questions for the witness? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That will conclude testimony on House Bill 7032. Next, we'll move to Representative Diaz's Bill 7213. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and all members of the state government elections. For us, it's a great opportunity to introduce House Bill 7213. And this bill is in front of the General Assembly for 18 years. And Tom and I, we never give up until this bill passes. Hopefully, this is our year. But the bill is about addressing an unfair opportunity that some state employee has. The state of Rhode Island has 3 types of employees. One of them is a classified employees, unclassified positions, and non-classified service position. The classified staff or employees require a license, require training, require supervision, and those are the ones that performing a job as custodian, CNA, clerk, secretary. Those are the low level of staff from the state of Rhode Island. The unclassified positions are the department directors, court boards, and commissions. And they also are departments director. So those individuals are the one in the same department that those classified employees are that I mentioned before. The last classification is non-classified service. Those include the staff from colleges and high board education, from also from other departments that don't require the same license and education requirement that I mentioned. But those three classifications, the only one cannot run for office is the classified employees. So in the same department, a director or a professor, they can run for a state position, but the clerk, the janitor, the CNA, they're not able to run. A good example is my experience with the state of Rhode Island. In 2004, I filed my campaign to running for a state rep. Even before I signed this document that you're familiar, that we do in June 30, I believe it is, I had to present my resignation to the state job. I was working for the mental health department, and I resigned with 5 kids. We all knowing is that we win the election or not. Another good fact was I didn't know how much the state paid for the state rep. So it was a big mistake at that moment. But anyway, back to that, I resigned. We don't know if I will win the election or not. Lucky enough, I won the election 18 years ago. But it's not the same experience for a state rep Rice, who was here. He was a professor of URI. He was able to continue to work and still be elected, I believe, twice, and still be a state rep. The same thing was with Rep Raleigh. He has to resign, but he was able to support financially his life. And my good friend here, Tom, experienced the same thing. We shared that experience that we had to resign. It's not fair. And please be in the shoes of people who wanted to run for office and representing and be the voice of the community. It's not fair that my boss is not able to resign and run for office, while me as a secretary, I'm restricted by the state of Rhode Island. This legislation have little changes through the years, and one big change is that Rep. Rhode and we agreed 2 years ago is, if the law permitted and this bill passes, people are able to run for office, and if they win, they will resign. We don't want to put people and family in jeopardy that if they resign before to know if they win, they will lose the income for the family and not able to continue to work in the same place they were. So I please you to review this bill. It's a great opportunity for every citizen in Rhode Island, and people deserve the same opportunity. It's a fair bill that we experience. Tom went through a lot because he has to resign. I did the same, and it's not fair that we here don't stop that experience in that situation for so many people. So with that, I want to pass to my colleague, Tom, if you don't mind.
Thank you, Rep. Thank you, Rep. Diaz. Chairman and honorable members of the community, I don't want to be repetitive. That's exactly what happened to me. So I retired from law enforcement in 2012. I became a tax investigator with the state a couple months after. I worked there until 2018, when the seat in my district became available, and I just determined I was going to run for office. I went on vacation with my family, announced candidacy, went on vacation with my family to come back to a phone call from the tax administrator telling me that I was committing a misdemeanor because a declaration went out in the local newspaper saying that I was running for office. That afternoon, I immediately, when I realized I was doing something wrong and violating this law, I resigned from my position, and again, thankfully, in November, won the election. But again, as Representative Diaz said, my boss, right, my immediate supervisor, not in the union, right, could have taken and stayed working. Fortunately, I had a supportive wife at home who told me that if this is what you want to do, go ahead and resign, and we'll see what happens in November, and thankfully I won. So again, I implore you to take a long, hard look at this. The average person deserves the right to run for office and take advantage of this opportunity without having to quit their job. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for either Representative Diaz or Representative Norrie from members of the committee? Thank you again. Next, we will move to House Resolution 7256 from Speaker Shikarchi. And Speaker's legal counsel, Nicole McCarty, is here to introduce that bill. And then we will have Representative Place introduce House Resolutions 7217 and 7218.
Mr. Chairman,
Representative Knight, do you want your votes recorded?
and my attendance, please.
And Representative Agello?
Yes, please.
And I believe you already got first, second Vice Chair Corvasi. Anybody else who needs their votes recorded? Okay. Ms. McCarty, welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chairman, members of the committee. I'm here tonight to give a statement on behalf of the Speaker.
Do you think your microphone's...
How's that?
That's better.
Start again, sorry. Good afternoon, Chairman and members of the committee. I'm here today to give a statement on behalf of the Speaker with respect to H7256. This is a concurrent resolution which has been supported by the Governor, which would extend the Governor's statutory powers stemming from the August 19th declaration of disaster emergency for Delta and other COVID-19 variants. As many of you may remember, there was language in last year's budget which imposed a 180-day limit on the Governor's broad emergency powers under a declaration of disaster emergency. Under the current emergency, these powers will expire on February 14th. Since the enactment of that language in June, Rhode Island has experienced extremely high transmission of COVID-19 due to the latest variant, Omicron. We have also experienced very high hospitalization rates, and our healthcare system has been under substantial stress as a result. Thankfully, we have seen some recent improvements, and the virus seems to be in a steady downtrend. We expect that many of the measures contained in the Governor's outstanding executive orders will soon not be necessary. This resolution would allow a limited extension of the Governor's emergency power of no more than 60 days. This would give the Governor some latitude to ensure a measured return to normalcy. It is important to note, passage of this resolution will not compel the Governor to continue issuing any orders or extend any existing order. In fact, the Governor can choose to not renew any particular executive order if it is no longer necessary. If passed by both chambers, the Governor's powers would expire on April 15th of this year. The Speaker understands that the dialogue tonight will be passionate and will include many different viewpoints from the committee and the public.
Excuse me, everybody in the audience, you're not allowed to speak when a witness is testifying. If you signed up to testify, you will have your opportunity to speak, and I will afford you the same courtesy to make sure that others are not speaking when you are speaking.
Thank you, Chairman. That is actually all I have. On behalf of the Speaker, I thank you very much for this opportunity to present this resolution. And I will note that various members of the Governor's administration are here to address the merits of this short-term continuance of executive powers and to answer your questions.
Thank you. Representative Place, do you want to come put your two bills in play? Welcome.
Thank you, Chairman.
Congratulations on the baby.
Thank you.
They're going to, members of the administration will be available for questions.
I do.
Representative Place.
All right. So, I, in essence, have the antithesis of the Speaker's resolution. The Speaker's representative just went on record, in my opinion, in my interpretation of things, and acknowledged that our Budget Article 3 last year ended the Governor's executive powers under his state of emergency. And as I interpret the speaker's resolution that's been presented, that includes variants. Because if it didn't, that specific language, including other variants, would not be incorporated in the speaker's resolution. My legal opinion. I'm probably one of the few non-lawyers in here, but that's my thought on it. My resolution is not about, isn't necessarily about the specific powers that the governor has executed over the past, not this governor and previous governor has executed over the last 2 years. I think you're going to hear about those specific powers from a great many people. I understand there's at least 400 people signed up to discuss the specific powers. My concern and what my resolution is designed to deal with is that we, as a legislative branch, took specific actions to end powers under a state of emergency. And our governor took it upon himself to subvert that specific action that we took. We recognized that the COVID state of emergency should end. The COVID state of emergency. And regardless if you want to focus on the specific language, there was a state of emergency in place. This legislative body ended that state of emergency. And the executive branch took it upon themselves to subvert us, to go around us. And while there can be arguments over the letter of the law versus the spirit of the law, which I'm sure, again, a great many lawyers are paid to argue about, in my opinion, the spirit of the law was the COVID state of emergency ended, irregardless of the variants. Our intent with that was very clear. We have been operating as a state under a state of emergency for just shy of the lifetime of my daughter. She was born in February of 2020, and under her entire lifetime, we've been under our state of emergency. We, as a legislative body, have in essence abdicated our policy-setting role to the executive branch. Our constituents elect us to come to this building to take action. Everybody, I don't think there's too many people that recognize that back in February, March of 2020, when the initial state of emergency went into place, that there were a lot of unknowns, that there was concerns about this body coming together in one place. I remember having conversations with Leader Filippi about the potential of this body being a major transmitter of the virus at the time. We were having these conversations in our office, and that, there would be needs for JCLS to start to take action if we were in this building. Over the course of time, we have learned that a great many of those fears were unwarranted. We've learned a lot of things, and we are back. We're back. We're back here doing the people's business, and it's incumbent upon us to do that. And what my resolution, the primary resolution, which would end the governor's, would acknowledge the fact that the governor's current state of emergency is illegal in our view, the House resolution, would put that policy setting back into this body. Because if we can go ahead and acknowledge, if you look back at the time frame the governor has taken to announce executive orders and then to physically implement them, this body can move that quickly. If we are no longer in a position where we're in an emergency situation, we can take these responsibilities. If there are necessary moves that need to be taken, the history has shown we can do that in the reasonable amount of time necessary. There hasn't been, to my recollection, there hasn't been a single executive order issued under this governor that did not take at least 2 weeks, didn't go into effect immediately. There were a bit times to talk about things and to allow time for things to be implemented. Well, we can do the same thing. We can have committee hearings on these things. The example are the resolutions. The Speaker's resolution was introduced, I believe, was it Thursday of last week, and here we are already having a conversation on it. If we need to, we can definitely move these type of things up much quicker. So I would ask that you would take into consideration this resolution acknowledging that our governor has usurped his powers as the executive based off the legislation we passed last year in the budget, and acknowledge that it's our responsibility to do these things. It's not the governor's. We're the ones that are elected to come down here and do the work of our constituents, and that's what I'm asking you to do with the House resolution. With the joint resolution, quite frankly, the Speaker's resolution sort of takes its place for my legislative intent with that, because I think what it came down to was for far too long we had been silent on this issue. So my second joint resolution was of similar nature, only the fact is it would have ended the governor's powers on the 14th as opposed to extending them to April 15th. So I'll entertain any questions if anybody has them.
Representative Hull, would you like your presence recorded and vote to hold all bills for further study?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, please.
I believe Representative Corvasi has a question.
Afternoon, Representative Place. So what's the salient difference between the two resolutions?
Between the two that I introduced?
Yes,
Or, okay.
these two.
So the House resolution, if you go through all of the whereases, is pretty much identical. What it comes down to is we acknowledge that the governor did usurp his authority under the Article 3 of the budget last year, and we say that every executive order that he's passed since since he initiated this new state of emergency has been illegal. We're just going on record and saying the governor's operating illegally since the passage of the budget. The second, the joint resolution states that, while what the governor did was sort of improper, we're now going to go ahead and acknowledge the fact that what he has done was within the law. The only thing he missed was coming to us. But as of February 14th, those end, and he needs to come back to us for an extension. So again, the Speaker's joint resolution sort of takes the place of mine. The difference between mine and the Speaker's is that mine would have ended the executive powers on the 14th of February, whereas the Speaker's actually takes the extra step of extending them through April 15th.
Thank you, Representative Place.
Representative Newberry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Do we know if Ms. McCarty's going to come back for questions?
I do not believe so.
Okay. No, please. I asked the audience. It doesn't help when you guys. I agree with a lot of you out here. It does not help. Please. I was going to ask her, and I say this with utmost respect for the Speaker, who I think we all know I have a very good relationship with personally, and I understand that he will have his representatives come, and that's fine too. But there was a meeting last Thursday between the Speaker, the Senate President, and the Governor, and then this legislation was introduced that same day right after that. So I have to presume that it was discussed at that meeting. And I presume she was probably present there. I'm not going to ask her what was discussed, but that's the time frame here. And I know from listening to the Governor today at his press conference, he indicated he did not ask for an extension of the emergency declaration. He did indicate that he's concerned about certain powers, certain executive orders, certain things he wants to continue to do, as Ms. McCarty talked about, continuing for some time. And my question to her, really to the Speaker, but as his representative to her, is why are we extending the emergency declaration? Because I know there's members of the administration here, but that's the executive branch, not the legislative branch. Why is the Speaker, the head of the legislative branch, putting in an extension of the emergency declaration that the Governor himself said he did not ask for? I personally, conceptually, have no problem if the department heads come forward now, as I expect they'll do, and indicate there's certain things that they're doing that because of COVID they'd like to continue doing for a certain limited amount of time, depending on what they are, of course. I don't mind us as a legislature blessing them or approving them or giving them permission. But I do not think there's any reason to give a blanket extension of a state of emergency. We've been in a state of emergency for 2 years, and frankly, no one takes the concept seriously anymore. As Representative Place just said, we can move quickly. We're here. We're here every day if we need to be. If there's some reason that the Department of X wants the power to do Y, it's not an existing law, we can do it quickly. I think we're making a mockery of the whole concept of an emergency, to be living in a state of emergency for 2 years and counting. And I wanted to know why the Speaker has proposed that when the Governor today said he didn't ask for it. But I guess I'm not going to get an answer to that question. I should get an answer to that question. I think we're all entitled to it. With that, I have questions for the department heads, but I let them address first. Go.
Thank you. Any further questions for Representative Place from members of the committee? Seeing none. Representative Felix, would you like your votes recorded as well as your presence?
Yes, please.
Madam Clerk. Representative Tansey?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Place, with either of these resolutions, we would be ending on the 14th our current state of emergency, and we would no longer be receiving the enhanced rates from the federal government. So that's what you and your co-sponsors are asking for us to end the state of emergency regardless of the state of our hospitals. And you're asking that we no longer get the enhanced FMAP rates for our Medicaid patients or any of those things?
No. What I'm asking is we're ending the powers, not the state of emergency. I believe the wording of both my resolutions speaks specifically to the powers as opposed to the actual state of emergency. I don't know, I'll be perfectly honest, I can't speak to the specific federal funding that you've mentioned. It's my understanding that you don't necessarily need a state of emergency declared in order to have a lot of those funds. But again, this doesn't necessarily, nor just like if I recall our budget article in the language of our budget article, our budget article in Article 3 did not end the state of emergency. It ended the powers of the governor under the state of emergency. So while Rhode Island would still be in a state of emergency, the governor's ability to act independently without the authorization of the legislative branch would come to an end.
It would end the enhanced Medicaid rates, FMAP rates that we are currently getting. So I just wanted to bring
I don't
that
know. If you could present the evidence to that, that would be fine. But again, if that is something, if this body needs to take action, I think we've shown that. Submit the legislation, Representative. I would invite you to submit that legislation to extend that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
That body. I'm still answering my question.
But you're not.
I am, because the whole point of my presentation was that we are back, and if there's something specific the governor needs to handle COVID and to maintain our ability to receive federal funding, we can take those actions. If we want to provide that power to the governor, we can extend that power. We can do that. So if there was a specific power that he executed, if he specifically issued an executive order that made those federal funds available to us, we could extend that, and he could come to us and say, could you extend this particular executive order? So again, my resolutions deal with the powers, not necessarily the specific state of emergency, no different than our budget article did, that I want to say just about everybody on that side of the committee voted to do in the budget based on Article 3 that we passed last June, July timeframe. So we did this. We already did this back in June and July. The question is, did the governor have the authorization to go around that? So we've already done it once. I just think that he went around us, and we can take any action he needs to maintain that flow of federal funding. And I don't know if anybody on either side would necessarily object to that. But that's a question unanswered, because the point is his powers. And they've gone beyond what we put into place in Article 3 of the budget last year. That's my opinion. That's what I'm asking the House anyways to go on record as saying.
Leader Filippi.
Thank you. I just want to be clear, Representative Place. So when we enacted the budget, I believe on July 1st or 2nd, there was a period between July 1st and 2nd and August 15th where the 180-day law had limited the governor's powers. Am I correct?
That's the way I understood it, and that was the way it was presented on the floor.
Are you aware of us losing any federal funds during that 7-week period at all?
I'm not, no.
Is any member of the committee, and I'll just through the chairs, any member of the committee aware of us losing any federal funds because of us limiting the governor's powers during that 7-week period? So when you read, for the committee's indulgence, when you read 3015-9B, that deals with going into a state of emergency and coming out of a state of emergency. The portion of the law we're talking about is 3015-9C. And that deals with the governor's specific powers under the state of emergency. So the way I read your legislation, I just want to make sure we're correct. We're not ending the state of emergency if we pass your law, your resolution. We're saying that the powers that the governor has under that state of emergency are limited.
That's the intent of the resolution, and if, again, I'm not the lawyer in the room, if I wrote it to say maybe it does, it's before this committee.
So if we read 3015-9B, and correct me if I'm wrong, the only way we come out of a state of emergency is by, one, the governor ending that state of emergency, or a concurrent resolution by both houses of the General Assembly ending the state of emergency. And we're not doing that with this legislation, correct?
That's not what this legislation is intended to do.
Thank you very much. I just don't think that it would affect federal funds. I just think it's clear. We need to make it clear for the record. Thank you.
Representative Corvesi.
Representative Place, not having the knowledge base of my legal friend, Lita Filippi, to put it in a nutshell, what you're saying is your resolution would pare down the governor's powers to those specifically delineated necessities that he would be looking for.
That is correct.
Thank you.
Any further questions for Representative Place from members of the committee? Thank you, Representative.
Thank you much for your time.
First three witnesses that we're going to call up are Commissioner Angelica Infante Green, Matt Weldon, and Neil Heitinen. Commissioner, you have the floor. Welcome. Just make sure that button is on so we can hear you.
Okay, is that better?
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Shanley and members of the committee. It's a pleasure to be here tonight. So as you already stated, I'm the Commissioner of Education, Angelica Infante Green, and I'm here to express my support on behalf of Rhode for H7256. This resolution was introduced by the Honorable Speaker Shakarchi that will extend the Governor McKee's emergency declaration until April 15th. Although we remain hopeful, and we all thought that the pandemic was over, that we'd be starting this school year very differently, that has not been the case. Our education system has been hit very hard by the pandemic. We saw it in the scores of the kids, the mental health. Being in person was the most important thing that we have done but in order to do that, we have to keep our kids safe. So in partnership with Rhode and the governor's office, we remain cautious and we continue to promote layered mitigation strategies to prevent the spread in schools. We've continued closely to monitor the situation in every school and have made necessary updates to the guidance to put safeguards in place. Thanks to the collaboration among state and district partners, schools remain one of the safest places for students because of the mitigation that's in place. While we have been resilient, flexible, and creative, we know that we are still in a pandemic. In particular, our schools, just as we're seeing in communities across the nation, continue to face challenges and shortages. I gave out an article. New Mexico is facing the shortages. The shortages that we're seeing in our teaching staff is happening nationwide. New Mexico brought in the National Guard last week to teach their students. We, of course, need our educators in our school, ensuring that our students are supported and can continue to learn and thrive. The learning disruption caused by this pandemic has had major impact on our students. So our focus right now is on accelerating learning, trying to close those gaps, and following the recommendations of a task force that we had looking at lost learning time. Teachers are crucial partners in this effort, but nationwide, these districts are having difficulty. We are competing with our neighbors, Massachusetts, Connecticut, for our teaching staff. Governor McKee's executive action to increase teaching and administrative staff capacity in our schools by allowing retirees to return to the classroom has been critical for us. Critical. This has been such a difficult year. Even, I would say, the same as last year in a different way. So we have experienced a lot of quarantining in and out, but what has kept us strong is that we have had our teaching staff that has retired, that has come back to help us and support us. So as you consider what's in play here, this is the future of Rhode Island. We saw that our percentage points went down by 5 points in math. We can't not have the kids in the classroom and have teachers sitting in front of them. Not just anyone, but just teachers that have the experience that could come back. So I am very proud because Rhode Island has risen to the occasion time and time again. We have outdone other states, including our neighbor states, in being able to come back and continue to teach our children. So I want to underscore that RIDE is committed to getting all our students back on track. We're here to make sure that our kids get a world-class education. And that is why it's important for us to keep what we have in play. We don't have a second to lose for our students. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for the Commissioner? Representative Newberry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioner, you mentioned just now one example, bringing back retired teachers. I think it's a good example of something we're doing. Would you be able to provide the committee a specific list of current executive orders that you feel are important to keep in place? I don't mean you can if you're here, but even afterwards. Specific executive orders that you would like to see extended for 60 or 90 days that we could pass in a separate standalone bill?
Sure.
Okay. Thank you.
Representative McCall.
I just didn't know, do you have an idea of the number of retiree teachers that were brought back through this executive order?
I don't know off the top of my head, but I can get you those numbers. Absolutely. And we trained them. One of the things that we did is that we trained them with the new procedures that are going on. So it's really important for us.
Any Representative Knight?
Commissioner, can you detail for us in really broad strokes, but just ballpark, what are your major things that you're doing now that are enabled by the executive orders that you couldn't do without the executive order?
Well, there are quite a few. Some are a little controversial, but obviously the retiree teachers coming back, I think that's really important. As you know, we have masks in schools. Right. We also have the other mitigations that are in place that are supported by the executive order. And that has really kept us, and I know that we have differing ideas about it, and I get it. My only concern is that our kids go to school and they go to school safely.
I get that, and I'm just trying to get a sense of what you're doing now that you just couldn't do in the absence of specific legislation that Rep. Newberry talked about or something like that.
So I'll give you an example. So this one that I just mentioned, our teachers that retire cannot come back till after 90 days. That's a problem for us.
Yeah.
And we were down September, I think it was maybe almost 200 teachers across the state. This is not in one area. So it's a pretty serious problem. And like I said, I gave you all articles. We have companies that are poaching our teachers. It's a very difficult time, and we have to do whatever we can to keep the most professional people in front of our students, which are teachers.
All right, thank you.
Any further questions from members of the committee for the Commissioner? Seeing none, we'll next go to Neil Heitman. Welcome.
Thank you, Chairman. Can you hear me?
Yeah,
okay?
Great. Thank you.
Well, good evening, Chairman, members of the committee. Thank you so much for having me today. My name is Neil Heitman. I'm the legislative liaison for the Rhode Island Department of Health. First off, I want to thank the Speaker and the Senate President for putting in these concurrent resolutions extending the governor's COVID emergency declaration for an additional 60 days. And I just want to start to give everybody kind of a level set where we are right now. As everybody hopefully knows, we have weathered the worst of the Delta and Omicron variants surges that have hit Rhode Island. However, we're not out of the woods yet. The second week of January, we reached the peak of our most recent surge with just over 3,400 new cases per week. The following week of the 15th, we saw our peak in hospitalizations with 554 new COVID hospitalizations. Last week, we saw just over 1,800 new cases reported to us and 395 new hospitalizations. So this is good news for our healthcare system. This is good news for the state of Rhode Island that we're on the downward slope of our peak due to surges in Delta and Omicron, really combined hit that we're faced here in the state. We see the light at the end of the tunnel. However, we're not nearly out of the woods yet or close to where we were when we were able to recommend dropping statewide mitigation measures as we were in the summertime, when we were consistently seeing hospitalizations under 200, 100 new hospitalizations per week. But we do forecast that we'll be getting there. Until we do, we are very much in support of extending the governor's executive orders. There's 8 executive orders specifically that Interim Director McDonald outlined in a letter which we provided to the committee, which affect the operations here at the Rhode Island Department of Health. And I'll be brief and happy to answer any questions about those. I do just want to briefly touch on the masking mandates, as I know there's a lot of folks here to testify on behalf of masking mandates in general and in school. And I want them to know, I want you to know that we hear their concerns, we understand their concerns. Masking is it's inconvenient, it's uncomfortable for all of us, and we would not be in favor of masking in schools or elsewhere if there were any significant health concerns. And we wouldn't be in favor of them if the evidence didn't clearly show masks do help mitigate spread of COVID-19. Specifically in schools, recent CDC study showed that school-associated COVID-19 outbreaks in schools were 3.5 times higher than those in schools without a mask requirement. So masking interventions work best when everyone's wearing high-quality masks, wearing it correctly, and they're most effective when at the state level when we're seeing high levels of transmission in the state. We're currently working with the governor's office, Rhode, and across the whole of government to continue to monitor and set metrics on when we may hopefully be able to return to normal, and recommend relieving statewide mask mandates. But as I mentioned at the outset, we're not close to where we were. We have the tools to get there. We have plenty of vaccine. We have availability for boosters. Unfortunately, we're only about 34% of the state receiving boosters. So I want to leave you all today, really, we have the tools to get out of this pandemic. We need to take advantage of them, and I can encourage you all to, talk to your constituents if there's any concerns about vaccine hesitancy. We're always here to try to answer those questions, and I'm happy to answer any questions about any of the other executive orders that we outlined in our letter today. So thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Representative Corvasi and then Leader Filippi.
Thank you. As a state representative, sometimes we have to ask questions that are uncomfortable, both to ask and to listen to the answers. And I think this is a question that perhaps you may have difficulty answering, but perhaps you could give some insight, especially considering the department you represent. Do you foresee a time where we look at COVID in the rearview mirror as we do the flu?
Sure. Absolutely. I think that, we're seeing in other countries COVID reaching endemic levels, and thankfully we have additional tools in our toolbox to fight COVID and prepare for it. Vaccination, treatments are expanding very rapidly and quickly, and as supply increases, I think we're going to be able to get to a manageable level of COVID in Rhode Island. But I really want to stress the importance of staying up to date in your vaccines in order to get us to that next step, so we don't have these widespread outbreaks and we're not overrunning our healthcare system like we have seen in the recent surges. The timing of Delta and Omicron coming in right around the same time as the holidays, and the the effectiveness of the vaccine, the primary series of the vaccines waning against Omicron, we're going to have to be prepared to continue to deal with emergent variants. And with the global vaccination rates of only about 50%, we can expect to see new variants. So we need to be prepared. But we will get there. Can't give us, no one can forecast this pandemic, and this virus has been very trying, as everybody knows, and mutates. But I do think we have a hopeful future, especially with the new treatments becoming available, oral antivirals.
I thank you for a reasonable and measured response. Sometimes we try to hear those things we wish to hear as opposed to what is actually said. So, as we have variations of the flu, we will have variations of COVID. And as we don't wear masks for the flu, we will not wear masks for COVID down the road. Am I correct?
I think you have to look at the severity of each variant and forecasting and looking at lessons learned from other countries. We had a very narrow window of heads up on Omicron with the lessons learned in South Africa and Europe. So I can't, we can't make that guarantee. And I do want to clarify that in healthcare settings, when there's widespread flu in the state, we do require masking of unvaccinated healthcare officials. This is healthcare workers. This is nothing new. Again, novel virus that just hit the globe 2 years ago. We are still learning about how this virus mutates, its contagiousness, its impact, and the ability of vaccines and boosters to keep folks safe. This is evolving. So,
I realize that, but just as we don't, and I understand what you're saying about masking healthcare workers, but as we don't expect the public to mask during a flu epidemic, there will come a time where we will not ask the public to mask with perhaps a resurgence of COVID, depending on the level of that resurgence.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And I will leave you with this. I never thought I'd say that the good old days was February of 2020. Thank you.
Representative Knight.
Thank you. Hi, Neil. How are you?
Very well, Rep. Good to see you.
And I just want to say thank you for all your assistance in answering questions about our constituents' concerns and whatnot. You and your team have done a fabulous job about providing answers during this whole thing. My question is, we're contemplating a 60-day extension of the emergency power. What steps is your department taking to prepare for the eventual day, and it may be 61 days down the road, when there's not an emergency power? Just like I asked the commissioner, are you taking steps to prepare basically a post declaration of emergency COVID package of legislation so that you can manage going forward?
Yes, absolutely. So I spoke a little bit to the metrics that are currently being developed with and under discussion with the governor's office on mask mandates, that kind of thing. There's also the retiree EO that the commissioner mentioned. We benefit greatly from at the Department of really six high-level employees at the Rhode Island Department of Health that have retired and since come back to serve the state in our realms of finance, our modeling team, other pieces. So we're working, and we're also in a transition at the Department of Health on filling those staffing needs that are going to be. We really appreciate the extension, but in other realms, such as I'm trying to think of some of the other ones we're benefiting from right now. The remote meetings we're very supportive of extending, and as I know this chamber passed that legislation last year allowing remote meetings to continue. It's been a big impact on our boards and commissions, which we have a lot of healthcare professionals on that would love to be able to work remotely, and that kind of thing, we've run into trouble. So, just another one which we are considering introducing to the body for consideration is the recent executive order that allows nurses to recent nurse graduates to practice prior to getting the results back of and scheduling their national exams. They've graduated from nursing school, but they're just waiting for that exam to get them into work more quickly. That's something that I think we're looking to propose for your consideration as well. So yes, we're working across all of government to try to fill these gaps, and the additional time is very much appreciated.
Thank you.
Leader Filippi and Representative Nardone have questions, but just before we go to you, I think a lot of people are here and have signed up online primarily out of concern for mask mandates that are currently in place for students in schools. And I'm wondering if the department or if the CDC has done a cost-benefit analysis for those mandates at different age and grade levels, because I know younger kids under, I think it's age 2, don't have to wear a mask anywhere, but at a certain age they are wearing masks, or recommended that they're wearing masks everywhere. And there's been a lot of discussion of other health consequences of kids wearing masks, and I think a lot of parents are concerned about those consequences. Has the department conducted any analysis of that, or do they rely on any analysis that's been done by the CDC?
Absolutely. So we have not. We rely on the data provided by the CDC, the National Institute of Health, and reviewing the latest peer-reviewed research, scientific consensus that comes out of those national agencies. When you're looking at these studies, you really kind of want a meta-analysis of many different studies that have been conducted. And I really encourage all of you to, if you have questions on the safety, efficacy of masking, the CDC does do a great job of, there's a link in the letter we provided the committee that on studies done on risks of masking, and really the evidence does not show that there's a risk associated with health of masking other than when during enhanced exercise. That's really the only recognized risk from the CDC literature that we see. And I think everyone should understand and realize that the scientific community is, do no harm is so important to the medical community. It's and we would not be suggesting mitigation measures unless there was a positive impact and we were first doing no harm. And the evidence to date does not show any adverse health impacts from masking.
Leader Filippi.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Mr. Hyten. When you say there's no adverse health impacts, are you taking into account any mental, emotional health impacts, developmental impacts from masking?
Yes, absolutely. There are studies that speak to the specific, to the social and emotional impacts of masking. It's something that we take very seriously and are keeping an eye on the most recent scientific consensus. And there have been studies done that show no adverse impacts on emotional development, speech. So you can look at the CDC website. They speak specifically to those.
So you're not conducting your own independent analysis where we're relying on the CDC and NIH?
Correct.
So in Dr. McDonald's letter, he references a study that says those schools without masks were 3 times higher than those schools with a mask requirement, are 3.5 times more likely to have a COVID outbreak or transmission.
Yep.
Have you read the Atlantic article critiquing that CDC analysis where, and this is the Atlantic, it's not necessarily a right-wing publication, but they basically say it's profoundly misleading. Scientists, respectable scientists, say that the results are so unreliable that it probably shouldn't have been entered into the public discourse. Have you read the critiques of the CDC studies, which you guys rely on?
I have not that specific study. I'm happy to have our folks take a look at it and make sure they're aware of it. I really, I can't speak to a specific study. We rely on the scientific consensus of the experts in the field that are doing peer review and
Understand. So let me ask you this: if it makes sense for kids to be masked up at school all day, separated when they have lunch, how do you feel when you see politicians out at a restaurant maskless hanging out?
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Again, if everybody could refrain from clapping
we encourage anywhere in a.
Hold on.
You have to leave the hearing room, okay?
No, I disagree.
I'm sorry.
Disorderly is disorder.
Hold on.
All right, Leader Filippi.
So when you see groups of politicians, and I believe I just saw one of our governor and some of his administration at a restaurant smiling right next to each other without masks on, should there be a Department of Health order requiring them to wear masks?
We encourage masking whenever indoors during this time of increased transmission for anyone that's within close contact of anybody.
So you encourage it, but why not order it like you're ordering children?
So right now there are executive orders that require masking indoors, certain levels of capacity. And we absolutely encourage following the executive orders on the books right now.
So what about when you see high school basketball teams playing basketball masked up? How do you feel about that when you see politicians out at restaurants hanging out?
Again, we encourage folks to wear masks whenever they're in close proximity with other folks indoors. It's a safe mitigation measure. I'll leave it at that.
I understand, and I'm not trying to be difficult. Are you aware of the recommendations when wearing masks, especially KN95 masks, that you shouldn't have facial hair?
I appreciate that.
Yeah, I'm not trying to be difficult, but I mean, this is a real issue, and you're obviously bearded, and why wouldn't you shave if you're trying to prevent mitigation by wearing a KN95 mask?
So I mean, that's something that I'm happy to do. Brought to my attention. I think wearing masks. I wear a mask as often as I can indoors whenever I can. And I have no. You'll see me shave tomorrow, Rep. I'm fine with it.
Yeah, no, I'm not trying to call you out, but I just see, I see our kids all masked up.
I'm happy to do everything I can to protect my community. I've got no problem with it. I
did check it out.
Have never thought of it.
Yeah, they say to properly fit a KN95 mask, you should be clean shaven. And if it's so serious and we're making kids mask up, I'm just concerned that someone from the Department of Health isn't even properly wearing a KN95 mask.
I wear high-level mask because that's the most the safest level of mask that I can wear. And,
I understand. And how do you respond to other countries and other states which have made the decision to unmask their children? Are they not following the science? I'd just like you to kind of respond to that, please.
Yeah, I think you have to take a look at
Mr.
current
Chairman.
transmission rates, and we're always, from the Department of Health's perspective, going to suggest mitigation measures that are safe, effective, and can keep folks safe during times of high transmission.
I appreciate your testimony. I wasn't trying to be difficult, but it's an important issue. I just kind of want to get to the nut of it. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, if I may,
Yeah, Representative Tanzi.
is it possible to keep the questions to the resolutions that are before us a little more closely? We've got a lot of people who are waiting to testify.
Sure, we can try and focus our attention on the rest.
It was germane to the testimony that was offered. So I am sorry Representative Tanzi doesn't like the questioning, but it's relevant to the testimony that was offered by the witnesses. And I mean, this is all about a free debate and discussion of ideas. And I appreciate the witnesses indulging me. Thank you.
Representative Nardone and then Representative Newberry.
Yes. My question is, what is the end game? What is the end game with this? I know it's like data dependent, and you work with the governor. At what point do you think? What kind of data are you looking for to alleviate the declaration emergency declaration, what would you recommend? What number? There's got to be some kind of metric that you see that you can say, all right, this is going to stop now. We don't need it anymore.
Yeah, so again, it's under discussion. Where we've been in the past is moderate transmission and reining back a lot of the recommendations for increased statewide mitigation measures. That's 50 to 100 cases per 100,000 people in a week. Right now, we're at 1,800. We were within that moderate transmission over the summer. Again, I think we can get there. We can get there. We have the tools to get there. Vaccination rates, and hospitalizations for sure, hospital capacity, making sure that we're providing a safe level of care in our hospital, our healthcare system is very important as well.
Okay, you're saying hospitalization. You keep saying vaccine rates. Rhode Island has a pretty good vaccine rate. Is that correct? I think it's 94%.
We do. I think we're maybe second in the nation right now. What's really important, and I want to impress upon this committee, is staying up to date with your vaccinations and the protection that the booster and subsequent doses of the vaccine provide, and against new and emerging variants. Again, we're only at about 34%, I think, last week in state with vaccination rates for up to date, and we really have to focus on, the primary series effectiveness is waning. We need to remain up to date, as we do with flu vaccines and other vaccines.
Representative Newberry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm sorry I don't mean difficult either, like Leader Filippi, but my old boss once referred to sometimes being a lawyer as being a spear catcher, and I think that's what you're doing here today for the Department of Health, so I apologize in advance. But I have to ask you, the mask that you're wearing, what did that cost, do you know?
I do not.
Okay. The reason I ask is you touched on this earlier in your original testimony, but that study you were citing about mask wearing talked about wearing masks like that properly fitted. And I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I think a mask like that is not particularly cheap. And they're also, do you know how long you're supposed to wear it before you replace it?
Yeah, there's different, there is guidance on optimizing use of masks. If a mask's sturdy, you want to get rid of it, so yeah.
Yeah, my point is CDC has come out and pointed out that cloth masks essentially are worthless. I mean, that's not exactly their terminology, but essentially they're worthless. So if you want to, even if you believe the CDC study, and there's a bunch of other studies. There's a study from North Dakota that compared competing school districts, one with a mandate, one did, and they had no real statistically change in transmission. But if you really were following that guideline, then our students should be wearing masks like that, without facial hair, sorry, masks like that properly fitted at all times, and those are disposable. That becomes very expensive for a lot of families, and especially once you get below the high school level, I think we all know, I don't think we need testimony in this, kids are not going to be doing it properly. So it's well and good to say that we should be doing a certain thing and our kids are going to be safe, but particularly once they leave school, they're not wearing masks anyway. It seems to me the trade-off, as we talk about, is not worth it. I just wanted to point that out if you want to respond. Oh, and one last point too. You're aware that viral transmission is not just through the nose and mouth, but through the eyes, right? So why aren't we all wearing goggles?
There's increased mitigation levels. There's a spectrum of efficiency of masks, and the studies have, like you've said, shown that there's higher quality masks. We recommend wearing N95 over, for sure, cloth masks in districts. We've done a lot to support buying those. District can buy them, and we've worked really hard to get those out in our high density communities. High quality masks are important. I completely agree with you. There was another question in there.
Well, I was just going to say it was about the eyes, and my question was already touched on. I know you can't answer this, not because you don't want to. What's the end game here? Because this is clearly a seasonal virus. I mean, it's clearly, anyone with common sense, you don't have to be a doctor to recognize it's a seasonal virus. It's going to be with us forever. So it may taper off, probably will taper off as we go into the spring. But it's going to come back next year, hopefully less prevalent than it is now. But we don't know. But are we going to be doing this every year? Representative Corvese touched on it earlier. I think that's the issue. Chairman, I'll wrap it up. But you raised the point. Most of the people here tonight, they're not upset about extending the executive order, for example, to bring back retirees. We all realize the hospitals are strained. I think most people are willing to do things. It's the masking that's driving people crazy, because many, many people see it as completely, utterly pointless and theatrical, particularly when politicians, and by the way, I'm not wearing one right here, but I'm not the one advocating people wear ones, okay? We watched the NFC Championship game on Saturday, different state, same issues, and we watched the politicians in California make a mockery of this. We've seen our governor and lieutenant governor make a mockery of it. And, you know, how do you tell people you got to put a mask on your 5-year-old when the people making the orders don't follow them? That's the issue. I'm not asking you to respond, but that is the fundamental issue. That's why we have 400 people called in, and that's why all these folks are here tonight.
Any further questions for the director? Representative McCall?
Yes, thank you, Neil. I appreciate it, and I appreciate your comments as well. You'll notice I'm wearing an N95 because when I'm in a building where people are not wearing masks, I try to be particularly cautious. But Neil, my question to you is, could you talk a little bit about the impact the current outbreak we are having is having on our hospital environment?
Yeah, thank you. So, as everyone is aware, the situation in our hospitals over the past month, end of December, through beginning of January, when the surge was at its highest, was pretty dire. Short staffing, overworked population, both, all our healthcare providers, the entire spectrum. So the relief that we were able to get to some of our hospitals through FEMA, and I want to really thank the Emergency Management Agency and our congressional delegation for working to get that support. Was critical. It's we can't thank enough the dedicated staff at all our hospitals, and it is dire. There are executive orders, like we've said, the nurse staffing one, the nurse graduate nursing one, to provide some relief and effectively managing the short staffing that we're seeing it with high numbers of patients, both COVID and non-COVID.
Several weeks ago, Massachusetts released data on hospitalization with COVID or because of COVID. Why don't we have that data in Rhode Island?
Yeah, so we are working on it, and I think we're a few weeks from being able to report that. It is difficult to do that accurately, and our data team, first and foremost, wants to make sure we're presenting accurate data. I can't speak to the accuracy of how Massachusetts or other states report because of COVID versus with COVID. Some instances it's cut and dry. Other cases it requires careful chart review. We have done some of that chart review with some of our partners at Miriam, and it has shown that the vast majority, I think over 90% of COVID patients in hospitals are there because of COVID, not just with COVID. The data team, we have heard the desire for this data. We're working on it. Again, we want to make sure it's accurate. And we can stand behind it when we do.
But we're making public health decisions, and the basis for the public health decisions, and I think you just said, it's because of our hospitals have been overwhelmed. And you can't tell us whether they're overwhelmed by people who are there because they have COVID, or they're there incidental, and COVID is incidental for their other reason for being there.
No, I can tell you that we have done a chart review in this case, and on a limited basis that has confirmed what we thought was true, which is over 90% of the COVID cases there that are COVID patients that are hospitalized are there because of COVID, not just with COVID. What I'm saying is it's a little difficult on a statewide basis to report that in time without careful chart review. And to your point though, the strains on our hospitals are not just because of COVID patients. There's, deferred care has led to additional hospitalizations as well, and short staffing. So it's more than just COVID, but COVID, is a major contributor, and that's by the data that we do have shows that.
Do you know what the data is for Massachusetts versus incidental?
I haven't looked at it recently, but I'm happy to get back to you.
Okay, I have that data. 52% are there for COVID in Massachusetts. 52.2% are in Massachusetts Massachusetts hospitals because of COVID. 47.8% it's incidentally there.
And
so how is it 90% in Rhode Island?
Yeah, again, you have to look. It's in some cases it's cut and dry. In other cases it's medically complex, and you have to look at that chart review. It's not something that can be reported easily, and I can't speak to Massachusetts methodology, and I can look into it.
I mean, don't you think we should be doing this chart review about public determining whether COVID is the reason our hospitals are so overwhelmed versus people just being in the hospital for a broken leg and they have COVID before we start making public health recommendations?
Yes, absolutely.
Don't we need to know this info?
It's important data to have, and we have looked into it in a limited fashion.
What do you need to do in a comprehensive fashion? How can we get this data? We're trying to make decisions that affect people's lives, and we need to know this.
We're I think a few weeks out from having that data and the methodology behind it. I can't speak to Massachusetts methodology at this time. I'm happy to look into how they're actually reporting it. I don't want to speak to the accuracy of it because I don't know. And then our data team's not going to put out data that unless we're comfortable that it is to the highest level that because or with.
Yeah. So Massachusetts, they're there. We should be there too. We shouldn't be behind our neighbor. They came out with this information weeks ago. And if the Department of Health needs funding, more FTEs, whatever you need, let us know.
It's also
because
it's also on
we
the
have to do
hospital
in-depth chart reviews. What do you need to do those in-depth chart reviews? Because we're making decisions based on public health data that doesn't seem complete.
That is actually on the hospital side of things, and for them to be able to report to us. But
thank you. Yeah. We have a couple of other reps that have questions right now.
Thank you.
Rep. McGaugh.
Thank you. It's in regards to this question about hospitalized with COVID versus hospitalized because of COVID. And I'm just wondering if you can answer to whether or not it's because of COVID or with COVID. Is there still an impact on the amount of services and the level of care that patients are able to receive, even if let's say 50% or whatever percentage of them are hospitalized with COVID as opposed to because of COVID, would that still impact the level of service that is required in the hospital setting?
Yeah, ultimately they're still in the hospital and they still need care. And I do want to get back to the point a little bit of when COVID's so widespread in the state, it's also not surprising that there are incidental cases there. Lots of people have COVID right now, but the burden of COVID positive patients is very much real. And to your point, Rep, if they're in the hospital, whether it's because of COVID or with COVID, it still puts a strain on our limited resources.
Rep. Tansey.
I was essentially going to ask the same as Rep. McGaugh, the fact being that the people in the hospital treating those patients, 90% of whom have COVID or are COVID positive, it requires the same masking, gowning, changing of PPE in between each patient, the intensive level of nurse to patient ratio, the same, it's a much more intensive process, regardless of if they're there for a broken leg and COVID positive, or they're COVID positive with, need of a ventilator. So there's still that same intense need of changing over from patient to patient, and I didn't want that to go unspoken because it is an additional burden on our hospitals. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Are there any more questions? Okay, Director Weldon.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members. I hope you can hear me okay. Just ever so briefly, I, unlike my colleagues, don't believe I have a list of current executive orders that I'm asking you to keep in place. There are a couple that are of particular interest to our department. One of them would be the work that we're doing to help with our worker shortage in the healthcare setting, and all the things that the governor and his administration have been doing recently about student nurses that recently complete being able to work pending their test. Those things are super important. They're important to get people back into the workforce and to serve, our constituents, your constituents that find themselves hospitalized or in congregate care settings. It's very important to the work that we're trying to do on a workforce side. The other one about remote meetings is very important. We manage over 13 boards at DLT, all volunteers. Many of them are retirees, and it's tough to get them to come to meetings right now, which means I can't get a quorum, which means we can't do business on a lot of things, and that means that we need continuances. It's a challenge. Allowing us to have remote meetings also increases participation from the public. Also a good idea. Those things are important to us, but just in a minute or less, the things that we've been able to do throughout the pandemic because of responsible executive orders that were done in partnership with you all. And I think I speak to some of you probably once a week or once a month about the things that we're doing and how we can work together. And we built a level of trust with one another, and we're all here to serve the public. We've been able to get unemployment payments made through the Department of Labor and Training, either the fastest or second fastest in the country in 14 of the 18 months during the pandemic. We've been able to bring retirees back that can work on these complicated claims that new staff are just not well prepared to do. So those new staff can maybe talk to someone while a more experienced person and a professional is able to really get through the problem in that claim and get somebody paid. We've been able to do things like shield employers from the cost of claims that resulted from COVID-19 to make sure that no direct cost was passed on to employers. And last fall, when you weren't in session, we put 2 executive orders in, which allowed us to protect employers from about $60 million in increased taxes that they would have realized had we not put a pause on how we calculate the taxes, look at the pre-pandemic data, and then hold the line this year with no tax increases. All those things were able to be done because of the executive authority the governor had in those emergency situations. And I don't believe anybody disputes that you can do good things in partnership like that. What I'm saying is it's a tool in the box that we'd like to have available. This Omicron variant and everything is still some uncertainty. Something could come up, and this assembly can work quickly, and I've seen it happen. I've been around for quite a while now. We've done a lot of work quickly, but quickly sometimes here is still weeks, and sometimes in a day or two you need action. We're just asking you to keep it in place for until the 15th of April, and we'll move from there.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Matt, thank you. I think you're one of the I think you're universally respected by members of the General Assembly, but I want to take issue with one thing you said. I think because of the COVID emergency, which was, I don't think it still is, but was an emergency, we've gotten focused on results over process, and process does matter. You made the comment that the department has put executive orders in place in conjunction or cooperation with the legislature. I think what you really mean is you did it in conjunction with the Speaker's office. I know that we all talk to you. I think your department is very responsive. It's one of the departments that covers lots of people. But at the end of the day, one of the problems with government in this state is the perception that it's controlled by a few people. The things you're talking about doing, I haven't taken issue with any of them on the merits. However, they really shouldn't come through executive orders. You're right. We're not always very responsive here, but if this is an emergency situation, we can be. Yeah, we weren't in session last fall, but you know what? The Speaker can call us back anytime he wants to. So as a matter of nothing else, public perception, we got to stop the executive order stuff. It has to be something that we bless. There's no reason why the bill that's before us today could not have been a bill asking us to codify for 60, 90, 120 days the exact things you want to do. So I'm not being critical of you. I'm making the observation that you as an executive branch official view the legislature as working in partnership, but that's not the way the public sees it. It's not even the way I see it. I hear it as the executive order is put together with the blessing of the legislature. Not me. No one asked me about it. I guarantee you no one asked most of the people on this committee about it. Maybe some of them. Do you see my point? This goes to the point, Madam Chair, we need to do this properly because process matters. It matters to public perception, and it matters to the validity of what we do. And that's a big part of the problem here. Besides all the other stuff, the emotional stuff, there is the way we're doing things is not right.
Understood.
Are there any other questions for Director Walden from the committee? Thank you.
Thank you.
The next 2 people to be called up are Liz Tana and Kerry Lapierre. Would they come forward, please? You may proceed.
Hello, everyone. Thank you very much. Thank you to the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Liz Tanner. I am the Director of the Department of Business Regulation, and I come to speak specifically about open meetings laws. One of the important things that the governor was able to do because of the state of emergency was to issue Executive Order 2201 on January 6th of this year, allowing remote participation in public meetings. And DBR throughout the entire pandemic has been a leader in providing information to all the municipalities. And many of the over 3,800 boards and commissions that OMA oversees. Some of those are town and city councils, school committees, planning and zoning boards, but some are also the Bristol 4th of July Committee or the Tree and Cemetery Commission. And of note, the General Assembly does not actually follow OMA, so they don't have to follow the rules, and so I know that's often a question. So the executive order has been essential to ensuring the continuity of government functions during the Omicron surge, which saw the highest positivity rates of the pandemic so far. In fact, that during many parts of COVID, it's been extremely difficult for the boards and commissions to get a quorum, resulting in the lack of economic development, lack of building. Being able to do basic approvals has been very difficult because of the large portion of the folks who volunteer on these boards and commissions are either senior citizens or parents with young children. And so without Executive Order 22-1, all board members must attend those meetings in person, and there was no requirement for any public body to provide live streaming or remote participation. So through these emergency powers, the governor used this executive order to allow public body members to participate remotely in meetings and to require remote viewing and participation by the public. And so this meant that board members, staff, and public could participate safely in hybrid or virtual meetings when COVID positivity rates were at record highs without risking themselves or others for COVID. This meant that essential government functions such as issuing licenses and granting variances were able to continue without delays. And this meant that remote participation would benefit the public body and its public audience during times when the meeting in person is risky or quorums cannot be achieved because too many members are in COVID isolation or quarantine. So this EO continues to provide flexibility that is necessary for state and local government to continue navigating the pandemic this winter. And it's a good example of why the governor's emergency powers should be extended to continue to provide remote participation at public meetings. Thank you.
Any questions from the committee? No? Okay, thank you. Oh, I'm sorry.
Hi, Liz. I think it's worth noting for the record that the House of Representatives passed a modified OMA bill to account for the pandemic issues that arise, and it died across the hall in the Senate. I am really teetering on this question of this bill. And we've talked a lot about issues in health, but one of the things that makes me tilt towards that side of the room is the idea that in order to get pandemic-friendly open meetings, we would subvert the entire system of government of checks and balances by introducing a fourth super legislator in the form of the governor. That's a little bit of a bridge too far. We're meeting, masked up, right, in a relatively safe area. Other boards and commissions can do the same thing. I know people want it. I want it. I voted for it. I'll vote for it again. I'll get it done. But we could easily do that via legislation, for what it's worth.
So you recall the governor did allow for that executive order to cease when the Senate did not pass that. And so we have been without those opportunities until the executive order was passed in January. And so due to the Omicron surge, he re-upped that executive order to allow for those meetings.
Sure, I get that, and I just want to point out that this is one of those things that we as a collective royal we can get this done through legislation, through the normal process. This is not a heavy lift, particularly when so many different groups with so many different concerns were in agreement on the compromise bill. When we had Common Cause and the ACLU and the House of Representatives and the League of Cities and Towns and everybody else who has something to say about open meetings, they all got together and they agreed on a compromise version, and that was not easy to obtain. And I'm sure we'll attempt to pass it again.
Any other questions from the committee? No. Thank you. Next.
May I?
Oh, one moment, please.
Kerry Lapierre. So finally, I put a face with the phone, with the voice on the other side of the phone.
Yes, you do. Thank you, sir.
We've just had our department heads speak, and I believe now, because we have a multitude of people, both in person and on the phone, who wish to testify. I think before Chairman Shanley left, he said there would be a minute or so testimony. So I think that begins now with the public testimony. I just want to make that very clear, so that we not only get your participation, but we get the participation of those individuals, many more of whom are going to do this by the phone. So I just wanted to make that very clear. Okay? And thank you for attending tonight. I'm sure you and I are going to have a number of conversations after tonight.
Thank you.
So please proceed through the chair.
Thank you. My name is Kerry Lapierre. I'm a mom of 3 teenage daughters, and I'm an ESL middle school teacher in a low socioeconomic district. This is my 26th year of teaching. I'm here speaking on behalf of my own children and my students. This virus is a virus that barely affects children, but our policies have affected them the most and have had nothing but adverse effects. My 8th grade twins have not had 1 year of a normal middle school. My high schooler does not know anything about a normal high school experience. It is mind-boggling to me that I can take my children to a concert over the weekend without a mask, without social distancing, without contact tracing, and then send them to school on Monday and the charade is back on again because of COVID. My children deserve to live their childhood to the fullest. It is not your decision or anybody else's decision how my children live, and the decisions are being made for them, and it's out of my hands. As a teacher, the amount of social, emotional issues I've seen this year are mind-boggling. The education gap for those of them that need it the most in the lowest districts has grown tremendously. And if you think teaching ESL students the sound of English through a mask is easy, try again. This is no longer a state of emergency, because if everything we were doing worked, we wouldn't have broken a record a few weeks ago with the highest positivity rate in the country. It's time to let it go and let people do what we believe is right for our own families. And I see the time. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Kerry. That was very articulate.
Anyone have any questions from the committee? No? Thank you. Okay, now we have to go to this list. All right, Erin Gosh.
Erin Gosh.
Is Erin Gosh here?
3 names at a time, 3 or 4 names at a time.
Oh, yeah, you could.
Well, we got 3 seats. All right. I'll also call up Rich Southwell and Paul Rianka.
Rihanna.
Okay, come on up. Oh, okay.
Maybe in the next round, any children.
So my name is Erin Gouch. Am I allowed to?
One moment, please. Also, let's have some people on deck. Kara Tibbetts and Karen Gorman, you're on deck. Okay, you may begin.
The button's up. I think. Yep. Okay. Sounds like I'm good here. All right. So my name is Erin Gouch. I'm a mother of 3 children in the Middletown school systems, and I'm here to testify on their behalf. Masks are absolutely causing a problem. I was given the advice to speak from the heart, and that's what I'm going to do. My 10-year-old son, who more than half of his school career, just about, has been masked. He has a speech impediment. And it hasn't gotten any better. In fact, it's probably gotten worse. And the feedback we got from his teacher was that he needs to speak up more in class. So to that end, I requested that we give him an exemption. We recently all recovered from COVID, which was brought home to us by my other middle schooler who got it in school. Fortunately, we're all fine. We were sick for a few days and then back at it. And the school denied it because we need a medical exemption, as if the absolute crushing of his confidence in speaking is not important. But he can play the recorder through a hole in his mask, which is allowed under the Rhode policy. This is absolutely inexcusable. My 12-year-old, who's in 6th grade, she doesn't eat lunch at school anymore. You know why? Because she wants to talk to her friends, and she can't with a mask off. So next time you're eating a nice rare steak, which the CDC recommends against, or you're dipping your eggs that are slightly undercooked, maybe they're poached on your Benedict, think of them.
All right.
Think of them.
That's all right.
Thank you.
Any questions from the committee? Okay, let's see who's next here. Who'd I call? Richard? Go ahead.
My name is Richard Southwell, and I live in Gloucester with my wife and soon-to-be 13-year-old son. We also have a dog. For the past 2 years, the General Assembly has sat silently and allowed the Governor of Rhode Island and the Department of Health to use emergency powers to enact a set of policies that have neither saved lives nor kept people safe. What they have done, we'll take a look at. Local businesses have been pushed to the brink of failure by the burden of arbitrary rules and restrictions. Many have had to close their doors forever. The owner's livelihood? Gone. Since we're talking about federal dollars, I think it's important to talk about the business owners who have lost their dollars as well. 2, the healthcare system has been crippled by a staffing shortage that is so severe, it now threatens the availability and quality of care for everyone who lives in this state. The governor has responded by whining about being price gouged by traveling nurses. Welcome to the free market, Governor. Most importantly to me, school children, our children, have been subjected to mask mandates that a Superior Court judge in this state found to be causing them irreparable harm. That is hurt and harm that cannot be undone. It will not be appealed to the Supreme Court because the Supreme Court won't hear it. That judgment of irreparable harm will stand. You are responsible in part for that because you have abdicated your responsibility to legislate and let the governor take control. You have an opportunity now to end this mandate and get back at it. Please end the mandate, get back to work, and do your jobs. If you don't want to do your jobs, find someone else to do them. Questions?
Okay, Rep. Filippi.
I believe you're a lead plaintiff in a lawsuit, correct? And,
That is.
And a few minutes ago, we heard the Department of Health testify that they were unaware of any negative impact from masking on children. I'm just confused. How does that square with the judge's decision in that case? I'm just confused.
Chair,
Thank you for
I'd
that
like
question.
to ask how this is pertinent to our.
It's pertinent to the witness's testimony, Representative Tansey. I'm sorry you don't like the substance, but it's pertinent. Thank you.
Chairwoman,
Sir, please
I'd like
continue.
to have these speak specifically to the resolutions that are on hand. Thank you.
Judge Lapierre found, after listening to testimony from Dr. McDonald for 5 days and hearing his best argument for masking children in schools, that irreparable harm had been done. Period. Other questions?
So the Department of Health that doesn't square with the Department of Health's testimony about a half hour ago, correct?
That is 100% correct.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? All right, sir, you may continue. Paul, is it?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. My name is Paul Ryana Jr. I'm an independent candidate for governor and also a former mental health worker. I lost my job due to Governor McKee's vax mandate, which I have an issue with because I don't understand how we're complaining about a staff shortage, but you fired at least 30% of people who are willing and able to work. People who can, like Ms. Tansey says, wear gloves, mask, wear PPE, swap in and out. That's what we were doing from November until October 1st. So if we're following the science, what is the difference between November to October 1st and October 1st until now? Nothing. You can still wear PPE, you can still practice safely during COVID like we did all through the pandemic during the Raimondo administration. Also, the gentleman that was sitting here speaking about unemployment, the healthcare workers are waiting 3 months and still have heard nothing from unemployment. I had my hearing yesterday. I was fired October 1st. How are these people supporting their families? It makes no sense to me. Another issue I'm having is Dr. McDonald said today during the COVID briefing that COVID is a preventable and a treatable disease. So why are we still in the state of emergency? It makes no sense. People are losing their livelihoods. People can't pay their rent and mortgages. I held food banks for people to go get food to feed their families. We've been out here protesting weekly, monthly, and we're still doing it. And the governor runs from us. He doesn't want to hear it. When is freedom going to come back to the state of Rhode Island? When are we going to be able to live our lives? When are we going to get back to the normal life in the state of Rhode Island? You know, does that mean stop? Well, I'm sorry anyway. Can I say one more thing, please?
One more thing.
When are we going to allow religious freedom in the state of Rhode Island? Religious exemptions are not being accepted in healthcare. And there's a lawsuit going on right now with that.
Mr. Rihanna, thank you very much for your testimony.
You're welcome. Any questions?
No questions from the committee? Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, those two other people that I called, I believe, were Kara and Karen Gorman. And how about Madalena? Madalena here? You can come up as well.
Who's first? Try and freeze us out.
Okay, why don't we begin with Kara?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Hello, and thank you for allowing me to speak with you in person today, unlike the Senate, who is still too afraid to meet with the people in person. My name is Kara Tibbetts. I am 26 years old and a lifelong resident of Rhode Island. I highly support any efforts towards ending the state of emergency and revoking our governor's right to act as a dictator. I am against House Bill 7256, as I believe it would cause much more harm than it would good. I'd like to take the time to personally thank David Place, Blake Filippi, Mike Chippendale, Brian Newberry, Sherry Roberts, and George Nardone for their courage in introducing House Bills 7217 and 7218. It is nice to know that we at least still have some people in our government that are willing to stand up against tyranny and serve as voices for the voiceless. It is up to the people to start supporting our elected officials like the ones who work together to introduce these bills and the ones who are currently running for office in order to stop this madness. We must stop voting in the same old politician and elites that could care less about us. Throughout the past 2 years, I have witnessed government failure at levels I never expected to see so soon in my life. We always knew something like this was coming, a takeover of our way of life, but who knew it would happen now? 2 weeks to slow the spread turned into 2 years of our lives being stolen away from us. As I sit in front of you in what we are all told is one of the most blue states in America, I come here with testimony of the effects that lack of proper representation can inflict upon a person. I've testified at this State House many times in the past and have also felt silenced many times. In the past few years,
Thank you very much.
In the past few years, we've been placed under lockdown, told we couldn't leave our homes past certain times. We forced churches to close. We murdered people in nursing homes. We completely disregarded our country and state's constitutions. We forced muzzles onto healthy children's faces 8 hours a day. And as of today, we are currently under day 694 of a state of emergency. That has never happened before in history.
I can assure you, you have not impressed this committee.
Okay.
For those,
I'm sorry, go
for
ahead.
those of you who watch and listen, there's a question of propriety and respect in order to get your message across. There are people who agree with you, there are people who disagree with you. Respect the process.
Okay, Karen Gorman?
Thank you. Thank you. I'm opposed to H7256 to extend the governor's emergency order. The federal and state government has both overreached their authority, both have terrified and caused neurosis of its citizenry. You have put, not you, the government has put rules in place for Alpha and Delta when we have Omicron. And that is nothing at all like the first two variants. The damage the government is causing by mask mandates, vaccine mandates, and other ridiculousness is destroying our children, family, and businesses. If that is the point, the government has succeeded. They have successfully made the curve worse than the virus. Where have I heard that before? Children shouldn't be masked. The damage to the children will show for years to come. I don't need to be a teacher to know children need to see lips to enunciate and pronounce their words. The psychological damage to older children is already being seen with suicide attempts, cutting, and other psychological issues. I personally know 2 families that have gone through attempted suicide and cutting. Not allowing unvaccinated people into the nursing homes is inhumane to keep them away from their families. We all know that vaccinated people spread the virus the same as unvaccinated, and that is also nonsensical. I'm going to end it there, but I do have an aside. I'd like to tell you, Representative Philippi, that you did a wonderful job in response to the governor's speech. And also, you all should be on notice that this is now a campaign issue. And in the meantime, although it may take me a little while, I will be getting my ducks in a row and working to exit the state with my tax dollars to a real free state.
Karen, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Karen? Okay, we'll move on to Madalena.
Good evening, representatives. My name is Madalena Chirignota. Since declaring a perpetual 2-year state of emergency, Governor McKee and the Rhode Island Department of Health have robbed us of a legislative branch. They've devastated our economy and destroyed our small business, hence the need for federal revenue in the first place. They've fired our frontline workers who were once hailed as COVID heroes. They've robbed them of their careers, their retirement, and their very livelihoods while allowing infected, vaccinated workers to replace them, which is obviously not for anyone's well-being or safety. The Rhode Island Superior Court has established that masks cause harm, irreparable harm to children. This was done because facts were relevant. As a teacher, I am seeing this harm manifest via an explosion of eating disorders, an explosion, and other forms of self-harm that I've never seen to this degree. Suicide attempts, depression, so much fear and hopelessness and loss of power and control over their own lives. These kids can't get professional help because there aren't enough professionals to help them. One thing that really shocked me was some of the statements made by Neil Heitinen, because I was in court when Dr. McDonald testified under oath. I am fully aware, I heard him acknowledge that there are no randomized studies, not one, that deal with the efficacy and safety of masking children for 7-hour school days. I know that they didn't do a cost-benefit analysis because they've acknowledged it. The reason why irreparable harm was established was because the facts were laid out. The in-house CDC's data, the MMWR reports that people I'm assuming are familiar with, they're not peer-reviewed. They're just in-house documents. I ask that you please restore our legislative branch and give us the power to protect our own families and our children. Thank you for your time.
Okay. Representative Newberry.
Very briefly, just a comment, not a question. I agree with everything you said, but you did say one thing I disagree with. The governor's office didn't rob the state of a legislative branch. We, the legislature, abdicated our responsibility.
Agreed.
No, I just want to make that clear because we now have the opportunity, one way or the other, to go on record and say what we think. We disagree with each other, but the body will have the opportunity, based
Please
on how
give
this
us a
comes out.
voice.
Based on how this comes out, to show people where we stand. Do we have a representative form of government, or are we going to keep ceding all the power to the governor, whoever the governor is?
Yes, thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you, ladies. How about Christine Waldeck, Grant Delurian, and Meredith Fortune? Just calling names. So somebody's missing here. Yeah. Is Christine here?
Oh, that's me.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
I just want to see who's missing. Grant, is Grant here? Oh, okay. All right. Christine, you may begin.
Good evening. My name is Christine Healy-Waldeck. I understand that the governor's emergency powers and state of emergency declaration provides the state with historic amounts of money that will hopefully be used to benefit the needs of the people of Rhode Island. However, I implore our lawmakers to seriously consider this question. What exactly are we giving up in order to receive this funding? For my family and for many Rhode Islanders, the cost to have access to this funding far outweighs the supposed benefits. To clarify, I am deeply, deeply disturbed that our governor is using his emergency powers and declaration to mandate harmful, ineffective face mask mandates upon our youngest and most vulnerable members of society. And I'm very shocked to hear Mr. Heitzinen from our Rhode talk about how he doesn't have any evidence that face masking can negatively impact children, particularly those with developmental disabilities, because just, recently, I think it was in September, the CDC recently released new face mask guidance for children that finally acknowledges that masks impede children's reading, speech development, and can be difficult for people with disabilities and people who are deaf and hard of hearing. And there is you go right on the CDC website. I sent you all a link and written testimony that talks a little bit more in depth about that new face mask guidance. But why are our leaders ignoring the cries for help from Rhode Island families whose children, like mine, are very negatively impacted from having to wear an ineffective cloth across their mouths for 6 hours a day? I do also find it abhorrent that our governor used his emergency powers to coerce all of our healthcare workers to undergo the liability-free invasive medical procedure of vaccination. I just, esteemed legislators going forward, may I just have a closing
Wrap it up, please.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you. I beseech you all to please always work together with the executive branch as a whole governing body and end the governor's emergency powers and state of emergency immediately. Please vow to forever protect our system of checks and balances. And I implore you to please seek funding streams that do not compromise our fundamental human rights to bodily autonomy and safety, or our children's physical need to be able to breathe and learn and communicate freely at school.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions for the witness? No? All right. Grant?
No.
Welcome. Yes. It was your button up?
Now I am. Okay.
Okay.
I have a simple, short, 30-second request, and that is, regardless of what you pass regarding public meetings, I'm a strongly support in-person public meetings. And I'm a Providencean. We have in Providence enough big rooms, auditoriums where people can be socially distant and we can have in-person public meetings. I do not like this remote stuff. However, if it's the pleasure of this commission to continue remote, then I would respectfully request that there has to be an allowance for hybrid. Some are just doing remote without allowing people to be there, and that's not appropriate. That's not acceptable. If someone wants to be there in person, they ought to be able to be there in person. Also, some entities have just allow you to attend remotely by computer, but not by telephone. That's not very helpful. And so I just want you to take that into account. And that's my request. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the committee? Okay, thank you very much. We'll go on to Meredith.
Thank you. Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Meredith Fortune, and I'm here speaking tonight in regards to Joint Resolution 7217, 7218. I am vehemently in favor of terminating the Governor's State of Emergency Declaration. I am here to speak on the mask mandate. I am a parent of a second grader, and my child has felt the effects of masking, as have so many others. When you hear people say, oh, children are resilient, it's not affecting them, that is not true. Our children are the ones that are suffering, and they're suffering. Why? Because adult fears are falling on the backs of them. This is so unfair and needs to stop. Quoting right from Judge Lanford's decision, this is causing irreparable harm to our children. As science has stated from the beginning, children have a 99.999% survival rate. Yet throughout this whole pandemic, children have been the least affected medically, but are the most masked and the most affected mentally. I am asking that you please remove the mask mandate set to expire February 14, 2022, and restore a full return to normalcy as soon as possible. Our children have endured this for the last 2 years, and this has been going on far too long, causing repercussions with our children emotionally, anxiety issues, and physical issues. We are one of the few places in the world mandating masks on children. Many countries across the world and many states here in the U.S. have declined to mandate school masking and given them a choice to do so if they so desire. We should all have a choice to decide what's best for our own children. Masking has also become a battleground between students and teachers. If masks fall below the nose, students get reminders, detentions, and trips to the principal's office if not following the procedure. I don't know about any of you, but can you actually sit here and wear your mask 7 to 8 hours a day with one break? I don't think so. Instead of teachers worrying about mask compliance, maybe more time should be spent on literacy or in socialization. Our children need to live a life as children should, unrestricted and unburdened. The mask mandate needs to stop. The fear-mongering needs to stop. Please terminate the Governor's State of Emergency Declaration. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions from the committee? None? Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. Next, we have Chris Welch, Jennifer Caputi, Kim Loney Caputi. I taught 35 years of cursive. I'm not used to this. Who's missing? You are?
I'm Crystal Welch.
Crystal, okay.
I think she was.
And you are Jennifer?
Yes.
You're Jennifer, and you're?
Kim.
Kim. Okay. Okay, let's begin with Crystal, please.
Okay. Hi, my name is Crystal Welch. I am a mom of 2 young children. I have a 6-year-old daughter and a 3-year-old son. I'm here today because of them. In the beginning of the year, my daughter was going to go into kindergarten. We were told, bring this up with your school districts, and that's what we did. We organized, we got together, we petitioned our school districts, and all of a sudden, McKee threw down the Delta variant. He declared the Delta variant as, another state of emergency, and basically, it didn't matter. None of our efforts mattered anymore because we did have some districts that decided to go mask choice. When people say that this isn't affecting children, that's a lie. Our children are delayed developmentally, socially, emotionally, mentally, physically. This is affecting them in every single way. We're affecting our children in ways we probably can't even imagine, and we will see it for years to come. I just hope that you guys will stop this state of emergency and really take our children into consideration with all of this. The mask mandates need to stop. The arbitrary rules need to stop. The burden of COVID has been placed on the backs of our children.
And that's what I was here today to say. No amount of money is worth my children's childhood. They only have one. And I will exit this state within a year. I have 1 year. Me and my husband are out of here if this does not stop. We will go somewhere where they respect parent choice. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions from the committee? Okay, thank you. We'll go on now to Kim.
Hi, thank you. My name is Kim Lanaway, and I am a teacher. I'm a high school teacher in South Kingstown, and I am here to speak on behalf of my kids and my students. I will agree with everything that Crystal said. I mean, I have an opportunity as a math teacher to often teach kids for multiple years. And so I have students this year and last year that I had in prior years, and the change that I see in my students is dramatic. Their spirit is gone. I mean, I look at their eyes and they are dimmed, as are mine. Every Monday, it's like this dread that I feel because I've spent the entire weekend without a mask on, and suddenly I have to put this piece of cloth across my face and try and express myself for my students, and I can't see their expressions. It's very difficult for me to read their faces and know if they're understanding the lessons. I know they're not understanding as well as they typically do because their grades are suffering. Of course, they're trying to listen to me through a mask. I'm trying to listen to them through a mask. I'm not as young as I used to be. I often have to say, can you repeat that? I can't hear you. I get closer, and then they give up. And many just don't ask questions anymore. It's having a dramatic effect on their learning. Socially, I have students who would normally be chatty, and they are saying nothing. It's very, very upsetting and depressing. I feel that they are socially stunted, and it's really sad to me. And so mentally, I think the kids are in trouble. Learning wise, they're in trouble. And the last thing I want to say as a math teacher, and I brought a poster and I have to show it, is that if the masks are working, then why aren't they? Real quick. This is the data. This is, the kids have had, the red line is the kids, okay? They've had masks on for now going on 2 years. Almost no cases until, now here's where the governor just reinstituted a mask mandate, and look at this data. The masks aren't making a difference. They're not stopping this. They're just stopping our kids from growing socially, emotionally, and in every other way, but they're not stopping this virus. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions from the committee? Okay. Okay. Question here.
Hi, Kim.
Hi.
Nice presentation. I'm just curious, where'd you get that data from?
I got it from the Rhode website. I got it from the Rhode website today. I printed that chart. And it very clearly shows, in fact, I didn't even show on there that when he took the mask mandate away, and then, you know, it really shows very clearly it had no effect.
Here's what I'd like you to do, if you can. If it isn't too much of trouble for you or an expense, could you make that?
I got one. I even.
Wow, you anticipated you know what I'm going to have for dinner tonight?
I'm going to leave that with you, but I even went to the spreadsheet and I added up the number of cases in our schools in the last 2 weeks. They have dropped dramatically. More than half of our schools in the last week, more than half of our schools had less than 5 cases. The remaining schools, the other half, had less than 24 cases in the last week. That's in the whole, I'm sorry, that's in a whole district. Okay. The numbers have dropped off the charts. What's that?
In the district of South Kingston?
I looked at all the schools, but yes, in South Kingstown as well. In South Kingstown.
So you said, did you mean the state or the school district?
That data is from the state, but
okay.
But I mean, I looked at our data too. Our numbers for this year were 0, 0, 1, 3, 4, 7. I mean, our numbers were almost nothing until November when cold and flu season hit.
But you can give me that. You can give this committee that information on a
a smaller?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Right on.
If you could, there's one of the young ladies, the young lady there, the young lady sitting right behind you, if you can give that information to at some point, and we can make copies of that.
I'll email it too.
Thank you, I think that would be
You're welcome.
very helpful.
Thank you. Any other? Oh, yes, okay.
Thank you,
Jello.
thank you, Chairwoman Messier. Not really so much a question. Well, a question. Your graph shows the increase and then the decrease in COVID cases over a period of time. And during that time, there was a mask mandate. It does not show comparable data for a comparable area of the country, a comparable area of the country that did not have a mask mandate, their COVID numbers. It only shows that there was an increase and now it's going down. It doesn't show comparable for where there was no mask mandate. So I don't think it really proves anything about the mask mandate. My opinion.
I have heard that argument many times. I just had that conversation with Commissioner Green and Fonte Green. It is impossible, of course, to prove essentially a negative year. I think a lot of people have suggested that, well, if we had not had masks, we would have had way more cases. I mean, we had 10 times the number of cases as we've had since the pandemic started. That graph matches every other state and every other country in the world, essentially. The cases were it had kind of gone away, which is why the governor lifted the state of emergency. And then this new variant came back and spread like wildfire. I mean, that is the graph that you will see in any state, whether they have had masks or not. And so the masks, but we've had masks. A lot of data, and these Rep. Filippi and others have made a lot of states have data from a school district that had a mask and a school district that didn't have a mask. The difference in the numbers was literally a handful. Is it worth the mental health of our children to keep one or two kids from getting COVID when they are not affected by it? No. Every publication on the planet is suddenly telling stories about the mental health crisis our kids are facing. The masks are adding to it. They absolutely are. There's no off-ramp for these masks. As the rep next to you pointed out, there's just no off-ramp. Nobody's even saying, well, if the number gets to this point. It feels like I feel like what's going to happen is it's going to end for people. They're going to say, we might as well leave it on kids in school till the end of the year, which is what they did last year. The mandate ended in May, and they kept it on us in school until June, and the kids came back and they said, why are we the only ones who'd have to wear a mask? And then it ended, and then it came back. And I agree with this young lady sitting next to me. I am out of here. If Angelica Infante Green thinks she has a shortage of teachers now, wait until she tries to mask us again next year. I won't do it. I'm not myself. The kids aren't getting the best that they can, and people are going to leave in droves.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, Jennifer.
Good evening. I'm Jennifer Caputi, and as an attorney, my testimony will address the statute in question, titled Governor's Responsibilities Relating to Disaster Emergencies. The law states the governor shall be responsible for meeting the dangers to the state and people presented by disasters. The most recent case when the governor rightfully exercised his powers under the law to declare a state of emergency was the snowstorm we had this past weekend. Based on the weather forecast, blizzard conditions resulting in dangerous conditions. The governor's order declaring a disaster emergency was justified under these dangers because there was an imminent threat to the public safety and property. Now, imagine if the governor extended this disaster emergency past past the day of the blizzard, when the reasons for the emergency no longer existed, applied to the circumstances where there was no more dangerous weather conditions. Any extension of that state of emergency for a blizzard would be an illegal continuation of emergency executive powers. I realize COVID-19 circumstances may not be as clear as snow falling from the sky or 50 to 80 mile per hour winds. But the citizens of this state demand and deserve more than the one sentence written in the concurrent resolution bill as a reason to extend the emergency. In March 2020, the circumstances justified a state of emergency posed by COVID-19. However, fast forward to 2022, almost 2 years later, 695 days later, there are new circumstances where an imminent threat to the public health and life posed by COVID no longer exists today. Before you approve 7256, ask yourself the following question. Do I truly feel there is a threat of imminent harm from COVID-19? Do I truly feel like we're in the state of emergency? Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. Any questions from the committee? Okay, next we're going to call up Courtney Golia, Sophia Harrington, Donna Silva.
Put it in your office.
Okay, Courtney?
Yes. Am I on?
Yeah, well, if your button's up, push the red button, it comes up, you're on.
Okay, thank you. As a Rhode Island citizen, parent, and licensed healthcare provider, I do oppose Bill 7256 and am pro 7217 and 7218. I know Representative Tansey had indicated that we would lose FMAP funding for our hospitals based on if Bill 7217 or 7218 were approved, but that is not correct. Those funds are based on state of federal public health emergency. All states are currently receiving those funds, even though we're only one of 21 states who are currently under a state of emergency. I oppose the bill firstly because there is no state of emergency. The FDA and CDC has said that Omicron is now by far the most circulating variant, and the researchers with the CDC's COVID-19 response team actually published a study on January 11th of this year comparing Delta to Omicron. And they looked at 52,297 Omicron cases. 7 of those cases were admitted to the ICU, which is a percentage of 0.013%, with 1 death out of that total, which is a percentage of 0.0019%. To get some perspective on those numbers, our current maternal mortality in the United States is 17.4 per 100,000 live births. That is a percentage of 0.017% of live births end in the death of a mother. That's higher than the percentage of ICU admissions for Omicron found in this large study. It's suspected that 2/3 of those deaths are preventable, yet we don't have a state of emergency currently to address that. Speaking of preventable, if you go to c19early.com, you can review a plethora of treatments that are available for COVID-19, none of which are being provided in Rhode Island to prevent hospitalization, despite efficacy in preventing hospitalization with those treatments. If I could just give a personal account really quickly.
Well, you're going to have to wrap it up quickly.
I had COVID in December. I called my medical provider. I had a telehealth visit, and they declined to give me any treatments.
I was referred for monoclonal antibodies, which you can only get a referral if you're at high risk for severe disease in Rhode Island. They had 70 referrals per day at one clinic and could only provide 5 treatments per day. That I specifically requested other treatments that have proven efficacy, and I was denied those treatments by my provider in Rhode Island and was told to present myself to the hospital should I have trouble breathing. I followed up by having a telehealth visit with a provider from a different state who called in prescription medications for me to CVS here in Rhode Island to treat me from out of state. So if there are treatments available for this disease to lower the hospitalization rates, and under these executive orders we have not utilized them, then I don't know what the executive orders are being used for.
Thank you. I have a question. Where was that study held?
It was the Kaiser Permanente hospital system in California.
In California, okay.
I emailed a PDF of the study to the committee.
Okay. And did you have severe symptoms? Is that why you had to go through Massachusetts?
It wasn't Massachusetts, but yes, I was, on day 5, my symptoms were worsening, and I did have a risk factor, so that's why I had called for treatment.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions from the committee? Thank you. How about now, Sophia? Yeah, you can put that closer to you. Pull it closer to you. There you go.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, my name is Sophia Harrington. And
Just take your time. That's fine.
And I go to Brown Avenue School in Johnston, and I have been seeing lots of masks in it, and it makes me feel that the COVID-19 is really bad, but when I go to school, I do not have to wear a mask because I am visually impaired and I cannot see well. Thank you.
Okay, is that all you want to say, Sophia? Yeah. Well, thank you very much. You did a good job. And Donna?
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for letting me speak tonight. I would like to end the governor's powers, emergency powers. I feel that they were abused. To make a mandate for vaccine for healthcare workers and knowing that it would be detrimental to Rhode Island citizens for care it's just inexcusable. My father passed away last week alone. My mother, who is married to him for 67 years, could not go to that hospital. Why couldn't she wear PPE like the nurses? I don't understand. It was just heartless and cruel. We don't have any idea, what they did to him while he was there. We had no one would call, no one would give any information. This just has to stop. It really does. And to top it off, somebody with COVID, a positive testing COVID nurse could take care of him. But my mother, who was with him for 67 years, a Korean veteran, couldn't have his loved ones near him when he died. I think that's just so inexcusable. I think you need to end this. End it now. You just put all these hospitals in danger. It really did. And I just think it's so unfair. And you don't have to look at my mother and see how heartbroken she is. You really should think about the people when you make your decisions. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Any questions from the committee? We have one comment.
Just one comment.
Donna? Yes. Just have one
just
comment.
One comment. Believe me.
Who's talking to
Right
me?
here.
Oh, I'm sorry, sir.
There's no question that the worst part of this pandemic, aside from all the fatalities, the worst part was our senior citizens dying alone. No question that is the worst.
But there's no need for that. There's no need.
And I would agree, and I would...
Why couldn't my mother wear PPE? The nurses that take care of him could have COVID, and it would be the same.
And I would agree that...
No phone calls, nothing.
I would agree that accommodation should have been made. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, everyone.
No other comments or questions from the committee? Okay, thank you. Okay, our final 3 in-person testimony from Ken Ackerson, Mark Blakely, and Jessica Barton. Oh yeah, I can see it now.
Just go to the chair?
Yes. Yep. Any chair. I'm missing someone here. Are you Jessica?
I am.
Okay. Oh, there's someone else coming up. All right, sir.
Ken Atkinson.
Ken, okay.
Hi, I'm here to testify to extend any of the governor's executive orders having to do with any of the COVID-19. I feel that the governor has abused his power. I also feel that the General Assembly and Senate has abused their power by dumping their responsibilities onto the governor. We live in America. There are there's you guys, the governor, and the judicial system. It's time we get back to that system, and it's time we get back to that system immediately. And as for masks in schools, Sophia, the one that was just up here, I think her name was, how can you not how can that not affect you? And I know the people that are going to vote for this thing to continue. Shanley, one of them, and all these empty chairs with sitting up here. I appreciate the time you're giving us on this, but I find it ignorant and rude that my rep, Ackerman, in Lincoln is not up there. My former rep from Warwick, Shanley's not sitting in his chair, and I see all these other empty chairs up here. I find it rude that they're not here. Nobody would give the hospital workers the time of day to sit and talk to them what they wanted back in September or October.
Excuse me, were you here earlier when Chairman Shanley was here?
Yeah, he was sitting in the thing. Where is he now? He's not here.
He'll be back. He had a personal matter.
The meeting is going on now. His ass should be in that chair. I'm sorry. And I thank you.
Excuse me.
For your time,
okay, thank you.
And I am done, and I will be leaving.
One other thing to consider. There are other committees going on also. Some of us here...
Well, maybe some scheduling should have been done where they weren't being doubled up the way they were, because I signed up for 2 committees tonight.
There are other committees going on, so please...
Consideration should be put on the people. It's time to end the BS.
Not even going to say thank you for that one.
I'm sorry.
Jessica?
I'm sorry, I disappointed.
Are you Jessica?
Yep.
Go ahead, Jessica.
So I do want to start by saying that he is right, that 2 committees should not be going on at the same time because that confuses
some nights
people.
it's 4 or 5.
Yeah.
There's only so many hours in the day.
They shouldn't be. So that way people can...
I was willing to sit here till 4 o'clock in the morning to get heard.
It gives people the chance to participate, so that is something to consider moving forward for you guys. But anyway, I definitely think that you guys should not extend the mandates for many reasons. I shouldn't have to really beg you guys to not do it. I'm 38 years old. I'm capable of taking care of myself. I have 4 children, 19, 16, 6, and 4. I am the one responsible for them, not you guys. I didn't elect you to be healthcare providers to my children or myself. I hired my doctor to do that. My doctor. And I've done just fine. I've raised my children just fine without you guys for 19 years. I've raised myself for 38 years without you guys. I don't need you guys now to tell me how to keep myself safe. I've had COVID twice, still here. And that's all.
That's it?
That's it.
Okay, any questions? No questions? All right, thank you for your testimony.
Absolutely.
That was Jessica. Mark Blakely? Not here? How about Pam Berkeley? You may. Go ahead, Pam.
I am a lifelong Democrat. Is it on now?
Yes.
I'm a lifelong Democrat. I have my bachelor's in mechanical engineering from nearby UMass Dartmouth and my master's and PhD from UC Berkeley. This pandemic has been so frustrating for me to watch because I did my dissertation in an application of data science. And the entire US health apparatus has been failing the American citizens. The person from the Department of Health who claimed that it's impossible to model the pandemic, false. Denmark accurately modeled the pandemic, and they have dropped all of their restrictions effective this week because they correctly modeled and saw that the pandemic was no longer a risk to their citizens in the Omicron phase. I, myself, a few weeks ago, did a very simple exercise, which unfortunately I was not able to print out to bring to you because my computer is having issues, but I downloaded the CDC's own data and I plotted the vaccination rate of every county in the US versus their infection rate. It's a positive correlation. There's a positive correlation between vaccination rates and infection rates. That means the vaccines in the population are not stopping the spread. Same thing between booster rates and vaccine and infection rates. The boosters aren't stopping the spread. The people who are getting up here and telling you that their measures that they're proposing to you are working to help stop the spread, they don't know what they're talking about. They're effectively lying to you to cover their incompetence. The data is out there. Better models are available. I would be happy to offer my services to you guys to help take the data that is available to the state of Rhode Island, to process it, to digest it, so that you all can understand what to do. My first week of college was interrupted by September 11th. I remember clearly the cycle of lies, fears, and demands of compliance that led us into a 20-year war in the Middle East. This is this generation, September 11th. We didn't win the war on terror. We won't win the war on COVID.
Would you please
It's here
just stick to
stay.
the merits of the bill that you're talking about?
I am
the
in favor of
resolution.
ending the mandates. It is a problem that the governor is listening to the wrong people.
I have a question.
All right. I have a question
I have
here.
a question. Pam, is it?
Yes.
Okay. Interestingly enough, I had this conversation about this exact subject over the weekend with my family, which can tell you something about my family dynamics, but we won't get into that here. Where did you get that information regarding the efficacy of the vaccines?
I downloaded it from the CDC website. They have their files, they have their data files available. I downloaded it and I...
Not from a intermediary source?
No, downloaded
directly from the CDC?
Straight from the CDC.
And you did the correlation for the data?
I could teach everybody how to do it. I'd be happy to show you guys how to run this yourselves.
Because, and again, I'm pretty sure people know how I feel about this subject from my comments this evening. But, you know, I try to also be fair and look at both sides. And I think respectfully, when I say this respectfully to you, and for the efforts you're making, I think that correlation was disproved.
How can it can't be disproved?
Well, it can be, but I can't, and I don't have the notes of the article with me, but I had this discussion this weekend about that very information. And respectfully, I'm not sure you're correct. I would respectfully ask you to review that information.
You're disputing my PhD on what basis?
Oh, I'm not disputing your PhD. I'm disputing the interpretation of the data that you looked at.
On what basis? On reading an article that somebody else wrote, or on your own merits?
Certainly not my own merits.
Okay,
but I'm looking at, and I don't want to continue the debate. We have a respectful difference of opinion.
No, it's not a difference of opinion. It's a difference of facts, because I have
No,
the
it's
highest
a difference of
quality-
opinion with regard to the interpretation of the facts.
That is, but you don't have a basis for disagreeing with my interpretation of the facts. You're just disagreeing on nothing that you can point to. You just read somewhere.
No, I'm telling you that there has been
this subject matter has been brought up and I believe disproven.
But I am qualified to peer review that. I am a qualified
I don't have the
peer-
information in front of me, but I think
Well, could we
you're
discuss this
incorrect.
further? Because I'm a qualified peer, I am the peer review. I am able to analyze the data, and the CDC has been lacking. Other countries like Denmark, who do have success, data that I peer review as being correct, their models are working. And they're ending their pandemic. It's over. Denmark is done with this pandemic. And I am saying that my types of analyses align with Denmark's, and you're disagreeing with that. But you're disagreeing with facts, not opinions. A model that works is a fact.
And I thank you for your interpretation.
Any further questions for the witness? All right, seeing none, is there anyone here that was signed up to testify in person that was not called? Okay, so we're going to start going through the people that have signed up to testify telephonically. First, we have Joseph Daly, and then Sherry Wallach. Good evening, Mr. Daly. You have the floor. You're the first telephonic witness tonight. Please try and limit your testimony to 1 minute. Thank you and welcome. Mr. Daly? Good evening. Is this Mr. Daly?
This is he, yes.
Thank you for calling in. You're the first telephonic witness tonight. Please limit your testimony to 1 minute. Go ahead. You have the floor.
I'll try my best. Thank you. Good evening. I'm Joe Daly from South Kingstown. I'm an educator, and one of my responsibilities is teaching students about governance in Rhode Island. The state legislature is pretty simple. I explained that we elect legislative members who represent the local constituents and generally make the laws by which we're governed. But this year it dawned on me, oh no, I totally forgot one of the most important concepts in state governance, the exception rule. You're all familiar with the exception rule, I know that, but my students weren't, so I explained to them. It says, if all of our elected legislators agree to hand their power over to just one person, and they do it month after month, the federal government will give the state a ton of money. I don't know what they're going to call it in the future when it's written about in history books, but we just call it the money for power swap. That's easy for the kids to understand. Believe it or not, I've had a hard time trying to explain to children why democratic principles don't really matter as long as you're getting a ton of money. They prefer the idea, I thought they prefer the idea of one person having all that power, just boom, executive order, executive order. None of that boring old legislative process, no offense to you all. It turns out a lot of my students and their families aren't very happy with the restrictions that are being put upon them by the governor. Imagine that. So in conclusion, it may seem strange to give up all that money just to restore democracy to Rhode Island citizens, but in honor of my students who've been voiceless these past 2 years, I'd like to register my opposition to this bill and say, please, do not pass it. Our kids are watching. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony, Mr. Daly. Any questions from members of the committee? Seeing none, we will move to our next witness, I believe Sherry Wallach. Good evening, Sherry. Welcome.
Good evening. Thank you.
Please limit your testimony to 1 minute. You have the floor.
Absolutely. Hello, legislators. Thank you for your time. I am in support of H7217 and H7218. It has now almost been 700 days of our executive emergency order. We have literally been governed by one voice speaking on behalf of all Rhode Islanders without the legislative process. As a mother and a parent from Portsmouth of 3 children, I don't feel anyone is representing my view. All 3 of my kids have now been significantly impacted, as I have shared an email with the entire General Assembly that I hope you all will read. It has been 3 grades in school where they have been collateral damage in a political struggle. We parents have been left out of the conversation, and we would like our kids to breathe. You have not let up on these kids at all. They are bearing the brunt of our educators and their fears and frustrations. We need to end the state of emergency now. Rhode Island's Department of Health has admitted cases are substantially coming down, and we have treatments. We all know now that the governor mandated masks in school in Rhode Island to receive ESSER funds from the CARES Act. That federal money goes to each of the school districts, and the districts wanted the governor to mandate them. And it needs to end now. My question is for Rhode Island, are we running solely for money, or are these federal funds more important than our children? Do we actually care about humans? The emergency has got to end. Dr. McDonald said we are heading into an epidemic stage. Please support ending the abuse of power. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any questions from members of the committee? Seeing none, we will move on to our next witness, which is Lori Gaddis. Good evening, Lori. How are you? Lori? Do we have Ms. Gaddis on the line? Okay. Good evening. Can you state your name? Guess not.
Hello?
Hello. Welcome.
Hi, Chairman. Thank you. I'm sorry about that.
That's okay. Is this Lori?
Yes, it is. Lori Gaddis Barrett from Gloucester, Rhode Island. It's a pleasure to be back in front of the committee.
Great.
Thank you for the opportunity to testify. I just wanted to let you know that, I, as a parent, have been waiting 2 years to have my voice heard in front of the General Assembly. And while I appreciate that there are a number of callers that are here tonight to also testify, I've been waiting 2 years for 1 minute. And what I would like to say is I am against 100% extending the state of emergency. Whatever legal mumbo jumbo needs to happen in order to continue some of the good things that came out of the pandemic, such as last year's H5891, remote testimony or remote participation in public meetings. Those are good, but we do not need to give authority to the governor to rule by fiat for another 60 days, and especially since he did not even ask for it. And I'm just begging the committee to let the people be heard. And my frustration, absolute frustration, has come from this universal mask mandate in K through 12. And I don't need to repeat all the testimony that you've already heard about social and emotional learning effects. I won't even go there. But I will say that if this committee votes to continue the state of emergency for another 2 months, that to me equals a vote to hurt children. And we've already referenced Judge Lampierre's decision in Rhode Island Superior Court regarding the irreparable harm being done to children. And I am asking that you vote against extending the state of emergency. And I want to let you know, ParentsUnitedRhodeIsland.com has a pledge. I support any candidate for school committee, town council, general assembly, whoever it is. ParentsUnitedRhodeIsland.com has a slate of candidates that will pledge to allow parents to make the decisions for their children. And I heard the alarm bell. I thank you for your patience. And again, 2 years, 1 minute. Please end this state of emergency or do whatever needs to be done so that parents have the right to make decisions for their children. Thank you.
Thank you for your patience as well. We appreciate you consolidating your testimony and getting your message across in just a few minutes. I know it's a lot.
Thank you.
Move to our next witness. Good evening. You're in front of the House Committee on State Government and Elections, and you have the floor. Please state your name and try and limit your testimony to 1 minute.
Hello, I am Claire Stottmuller from Cranston. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, thank you. I am calling in opposition to extending the governor's powers in the emergency and the continual insistence on masks and injections falsely called vaccines has shown that the information I and many others have shared from successful doctors and scientists like Dr. Yaden, who used to work for Pfizer, clearly not anti-vaccine, has fallen on your eyes and ears that refuse to be informed by anything not coming from the CDC or the Rhode Island Department of Health. I have sent much information in the past on such doctors as Vladimir Zelenko, who healed 3,000 seriously ill COVID patients out of hospital with vitamins D, zinc, and safe drugs. We've tried that approach with citizen responsibility to be part of the problem solving. We've tried the honey. So now I'm expressing the vinegar. Any of you who continues to assert that mask wearing has any benefit to health is guilty of willful ignorance. You are also violating the Nuremberg Code because a mask, never having been proven to prevent viral transmission, is a medical experiment forced upon us. Any of you relinquishing your government responsibility, which includes examining evidence that may not be compatible with the falsehoods with which you have been indoctrinated, does not qualify for the position of leadership, and you should resign your office. Any of you allowing the governor to persist in coercion of an experimental injection and know the highway banners about the FDA approval were not accurate, with loss of livelihood and access to society, is guilty of violating the Nuremberg Code and your oath to uphold the Constitution. This has been a pandemic of cases based on the faulty PCR test, never intended by its Nobel Prize winning inventor to detect infectious disease. I invite you to become educated with the information from those doctors who have been marginalized and censored, to reread the Constitution, which you have persisted in violating, and move over to the right side of history. In closing, here's something that may help you remember. Supercalifragistic experimental doses. Supercalifragistic experimental doses. Supercalifragistic experimental doses. Supercalifragistic experimental doses.
All right, we have the performance of the night. Thank you.
Spice things up a bit.
All right. Next witness we have is Lizette Rooney. Good evening, Lizette. You have the floor. Please limit your testimony to 1 minute. Welcome.
Hi, thank you. Hello?
Hi. Proceed with your testimony.
Hi, yeah. I just wanted to
just give my general concerns about the continued use of masks in school for our children. I've volunteered a lot over the years in the elementary school system of both my daughter and my son, and I just see how delayed I feel like a lot of the students are, just given the circumstances of the younger classes, which my son is now in. Masks are kind of impeding their ability to learn at the rate in which other students in previous years would have been able to do unmasked, not being able to follow along and get precise pronunciations, also reading cues and so forth. And that's not even touching, the aspect of just socialization, lack of being able to communicate with their friends properly, sitting in silent lunches and being just kept to oneself. So I had really hoped that, all of these testimonies will be heard and hopefully our students here in Rhode Island can move forward in the remainder of the year unmasked, like so many of the other states here in the U.S. are.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Any questions from members of the committee?
Nope.
No questions. Okay. We'll go to our next witness. We have Brian. Good evening, Brian. You have the floor. Please limit your testimony to 1 minute. Thank you and welcome.
Thank you. I did strongly oppose further extensions or negative orders. My big gripe is my 7-year-old boy going through what we've gone through, and their development and what's to come of this. And I just think I encourage the General Assembly to do nothing and let them expire, or the governor could end them. But thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Any questions from members of the committee? Seeing none, we'll move on to our next witness.
Hello?
Hello, welcome to the House Committee on State Government and Elections. You have the floor to testify. Please state your name and try and limit your testimony to 1 minute. Thank you and welcome.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My name is Mark Worcester. I live at 77 White
Got a promotion.
I'm sorry?
I said I got a promotion. I'm not the speaker. I'm just the chair of the committee.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. I'm speaking tonight in support of the resolution to end the emergency power use of the Governor of Rhode Island. The Rhode Island General Assembly is written into our state constitution, has been duly elected and sworn in to protect and promote the health, safety, and welfare of the citizens of Rhode Island. I understand that our Constitution provides for emergency gubernatorial authority for situations where time is of the essence, when crafting legislation involving committees, calendars, and sponsorship is too cumbersome to be in the citizens' best interest. However, today we are no longer in an emergent situation. At almost 700 days, this is not new. We have responded to the need and are ready to move forward from this endemic situation. To continue would be gubernatorial overreach. I believe in our system of representative democracy. We need our legislature to return to their constitutionally empowered and defined positions to restore the best hope of transferring our state into the vibrant, healthy, productive region that it was intended to be. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your testimony. There's a question for you from a member of the committee.
Yes. Yeah, Mark, this is State Rep George Nardone. I believe you're my constituent. I just want to thank you for calling in and for this resolve. So thank you.
You're very, very welcome, and thank you for all you do for us, George. We certainly do appreciate your hard work.
Thanks.
Thank you. Next witness we have is Leah Carlo. Good evening, Leah. You have the floor. Please proceed with your testimony and try and limit it to 1 minute.
Okay, no problem. I just want to say that I would like the state of emergency to end. It's really not an emergency anymore. It's just life now, and I think we need to just get on living with life. So that's all I wanted to say.
Well, thank you for calling in. Any questions from members of the committee for Ms. Carlo? No questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next witness. Good evening and welcome. You're live with the House Committee on State Government and Elections. Please state your name and try and limit your testimony to 1 minute.
Okay, thank you very much. I just want to make sure this is for House Bill 7217 and/or 7218.
You got it. What's your name?
Thanks. My name is Kimberly Worcester, and I live in Coventry, Rhode Island.
Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. I would like to say that our legislative body is in place by Rhode Island voters in order to represent their constituents and to defend the Rhode Island Constitution through vigorous conversation and healthy debate. The emergency use authorization is in place to provide our governor with the ability to make immediate decisions in times of crisis or emergency. We are no longer facing an emergency situation. I believe it is time to return to decision-making for Rhode Island citizens through the legislative body whom we voted into office to represent us. I would like to reiterate, we are no longer in an emergency situation, and I believe it is time to replace single gubernatorial decision-making with legislative voting and a return to constitutional governance through our legislative body. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions from members of the committee? No questions. Have a great night.
Thank you. You too. Bye-bye.
Next, we have Vincent Ward. Good evening, Mr. Ward. You have the floor to testify. Please limit your testimony to 1 minute. Thank you and welcome. Mr. Ward? Good evening. Do we have Mr. Ward?
No, this is not Mr. Ward.
No. Okay. Well, who's this?
This is Jacqueline Ayat.
Jacqueline, welcome. You have the floor to testify. Please limit your testimony to 1 minute.
Okay. Thank you for taking the call. I'm a mom of 3 children in East Greenwich. I'm respectfully asking that the mandate be ended. Enough is enough. I think that life needs to go back to normal. I want to speak for behalf specifically for my middle child. She's my daughter. She's a 5th grader. She is deaf and she wears bilateral cochlear implants. So she relies on the use of an FM system as well as being able to read lips to gain the confidence to really understand what she's hearing and what she's understanding in school. Being the student that she is, she's an incredible student. She is a bit of a people pleaser, so for the past 2 years she's been holding it together at school enough so that her teachers think that she's thriving. However, we've seen her come home and we've experienced every type of emotional meltdown from an otherwise very confident, very happy, very full of life young girl. She's struggling significantly emotionally and academically. My oldest son is in 7th grade and he's not getting an education. His teachers are so concerned about masks falling below the nose and below the chin and making sure that kids are sent out to the hallway if they lower the mask to take a drink of water or if they aren't wearing the mask properly. They're not effective, they're not helping, and none of us signed up to co-parent with the government. It needs to be done.
Thank you very
much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Any questions for the witness from members of the committee? No questions. All right. we'll move on to our next witness.
Almost at the bottom of that list.
Good evening and welcome. Please state your name and try and limit your testimony to 1 minute.
Good evening, it's Michael Rhode. Born and raised Rhode Island resident. So I would like to state my belief that
Needs someone in that.
government should, state of Rhode Island should stop their overreach with their mandates and allow everybody to pick and choose their own healthcare decisions and mandates and need to go bye-bye. Other than that, I would say, let's go Brandon.
All right, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Have a good night. Next witness. Good evening. Welcome to the House Committee on State Government and Elections. You are live testifying. Please limit your testimony to 1 minute and state your name as well, please.
Hi, my name is Cecily Lowe.
Go ahead, Cecily. You can proceed with your testimony.
So I would like to vote in favor of H7217 and H7218. Is this the House or Senate hearing?
This is the House hearing.
Okay, and in opposition to H7256. So basically, this is like a complete overreach in state power. We have a right to bodily autonomy. The Supreme Court has already ruled that we shouldn't have vaccine mandates within workplaces of 100 or more. So you definitely shouldn't have that extended statewide. There's several scientific studies that prove that vaccines aren't working and they're actually making things worse. Masks don't work. And yeah, it's a violation of our constitutional rights and should end immediately.
Okay, thank you for your testimony. We move to our next telephonic witness, and if I could ask the witnesses to try and focus their testimony to the bills that are being discussed now, which are regarding the continuation of the governor's authority during a declared state of emergency and whether or not those authorities should be limited. Who's our next witness? Oh, good evening. We have another witness on the line. Can you state your name and try and limit your testimony to 1 minute, please?
Allison.
Welcome, Allison. Go ahead.
I totally think the executive orders are too long. They should be ended. The pandemic is basically controlled as much as it's going to be controlled, and it's time to let people start living again.
Okay. To the point. Thank you. Any questions from members of the committee?
No, I just really asked them to vote to end all this government regulations and executive orders.
Okay. Next witness. Yeah. Hello and welcome. You have the floor to testify. Please limit your testimony to 1 minute. Thank you and welcome again. Is anybody there, or am I just talking to myself? Hello?
Hello.
Hi. Who am I speaking with?
This is Hillary from Newport.
Hi, Hillary. You have the floor to testify. Please limit your testimony to 1 minute.
All right, thanks so much. I'm calling in support of 7217, 7218, and again, 7256. I really just want to express that that all the data really does show that children are at no risk from COVID. All the data also shows a drastic uptick in mental health issues from anxiety to suicide. The reality is our children are at much greater risk of suffering from mental health issues than they are of COVID. Rhode Island is one of only 12 states that still have this mask mandate. Other states are operating at the same and in many cases better in regards to the COVID cases without a mask mandate. Middle school and high school, I don't know, I would love to know how many of you actually have children in schools that are being affected by it. Because I think sometimes the problem is that people just are disconnected to what's happening to our kids. And, middle school kids, high school kids, I mean, think about it. Think about grown kids, think about yourself. When they were, those are tough times for kids in the good times. But COVID has added so many layers of difficulties for our young people. And children just need to see facial expressions. They need to see smiles and laugh with friends. Their mental health absolutely depends on some degree of normalcy. And I just implore, if you guys are making your decisions based on, in all respect to him, but based on Dr. McDonald's testimony tonight, I found it incredibly underwhelming. I found him unprepared, and he really was not able to substantiate anything he said. So I sat here and listened. I'm not a political person. This is the first time I've gotten involved. I learned a lot. And I was very impressed with Filippi and Newgrave. Thank them so much for taking a stand here. But you guys really need to look at the data and really do the right thing for Rhode Island and for our children.
Thank you for taking the time to call in.
One more quick thing. You look at the greatest generation that went to war to sacrifice for our children, and I feel like that we're like the generation of selfish because we want to sacrifice our kids out of fear or something. I don't know, because kids are not at risk here. They are not, and we need to let our kids thrive again.
Okay.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Next witness. Good evening and welcome. Please state your name and limit your testimony to 1 minute.
Okay, my name is Deborah Janet. I'm a registered nurse. I live in Middletown. I want one or both of these bills to go through. We need to stop this state of emergency. We have to restore the separations of power between legislative and judicial and executive. We're not ruled by executive order or authoritarian decree, and that's basically what's been happening for 2 years. We have all been subjected to almost a state of tyranny, as far as I'm concerned. The damage has been done to our elders, to so many people, and will continue to be done if we do not stop these experimental vaccines. I shudder. I just wish everybody could go listen to Senator Ron Johnson in the Congress. He's had 2 different Senate hearings. He's had military, he's had lawyers, he's had victims, and the last one that was just a week ago is many of the significant practicing physicians. I follow the real doctors in the trenches, the researchers, and the medical journalists that understand everything. And I'm in sync with that, and I have been in the beginning. And the second these vaccines were going to be rolled out in this manner, messenger RNA vaccines, I'm going, oh my God.
Hey, Deborah, can you limit your testimony to the bills that are being discussed on the state of emergency?
The House bills 7217 and 7218.
Yes, and you're beyond the time limit, but I'll give you a little bit more time if you want to say something direct to them.
Go through because we have to end the state of emergency and save our state.
Great. Thank you so much for calling in.
Okay, bye.
Next witness. Hello and welcome. You have the floor to testify. Please limit your testimony to 1 minute and state your name before you start talking, please.
My name is Dr. Andrew Boston. I'm an epidemiologist trained at Brown. I have to prepare remarks, but I just have to use my time to comment on what Mr. Heitman testified to tonight. You know, each month he provides raw Rhode data, which I get to analyze. It comes through Representative Chippendale. And the bottom line is that I've been analyzing the data from July through December. Most recent December data, so it kind of catches a little bit of the Omicron period. It shows that it doesn't matter whether people are fully vaccinated or not fully vaccinated. What matters is whether they've had a history of a prior COVID infection, or what's called naturally acquired immunity. Because regardless of vaccination status, that conferred in December, using Rhode data, which unfortunately you folks, I guess, never get to see, having a prior infection confers about a 28-fold lower risk for COVID mortality and a 6-fold lower risk for COVID hospitalization. Now, Mr. Heitman was also, again, repeating the Rhode mantra about masking. Masking, as a clinical trial into one of the biggest trials ever conducted in the state of Rhode Island, it was a national study in kidney transplant recipients. Masking has been evaluated in 14 consecutive randomized controlled trials. That's the gold standard for evidence. Community-based masking has been evaluated in 14 randomized controlled trials involving 360,000 individuals between 2008 and 2021, and both flu and COVID were outcomes. Not a single one of those trials showed a positive effect of masking. They were all negative. In the history of evidence-based medicine, I cannot think of any sort of intervention like masking, which was recommended, let alone mandated, in the face of uniform negative randomized controlled data. And I just think you folks need to open up your minds and understand what's going on here. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Are there any questions for Dr. Boston from members of the committee? No questions. Have a good night, doctor.
Thank you.
Next witness. Good evening and welcome. Please state your name and limit your testimony to 1 minute.
Yes, are we at 7217?
Yes.
Thank you. This is Stephen Dahl, and thanks for this opportunity. Our state is under siege. The governor and so many other legislators have been fooled. The media is the mouthpiece of corporations. Even public radio and television have been hijacked by the corporations. Through the process of regulatory capture, our health agencies are serving both the technology and pharmaceutical corporations, not us. This is the norm now because, as our U.S. Senator Whitehouse has written in his book, Untitled Chapter, American Democracy, our nation's founding fathers, as brilliant as they were, made a catastrophic mistake. They did not guard against corporations acting politically. The single flaw in the U.S. Constitution is that democracy is not doing because the corporations form the government. That's totalitarianism. Unelected Dr. Anthony Fauci and his conspirators have pushed unsafe COVID vaccines, which line their own pockets and play business for everyone's health by promoting the wrong weapon to combat the virus while simultaneously attacking the simple medicine and treatment technology. The fate of the U.S. has skyrocketed in comparative percentage of rational and innovative solutions. And I'll jump down to the immediate attacks.
Oh my God. What does this got to do with the... Huh?
Thank you very much for your testimony. Any questions from members of the committee for Mr. Dahl? No questions. Next witness. Good evening and welcome. You have the floor to testify. Please limit your testimony to 1 minute.
Okay.
And also, sorry, please state your name too so we know who's speaking.
Okay, it's Mary Sharrock, and I just wanted to say that I was in favor of 7217 and 7218.
Okay. Anything else to add?
No, I just think it's time.
Very good. All right. Thank you for calling in. Have a good night.
Thank you. You too. Bye-bye.
Next witness.
I was hoping you had a...
Good evening. Please state your name and limit your testimony to 1 minute. Thank you and welcome.
Thank you. My name is Andrew Nelson, and I think this mask mandate is ridiculous. I think it is absurd because we have plenty of information now from our the science that the masks don't work. They don't work with the Omicron variant, and so us continuing to mandate masks does not make sense. This area, it doesn't work. It may be good for politics, but in real life, it's ridiculous and it's useless. That's my testimony.
All right. Thank you for your testimony. Do members of the committee have any questions for Mr. Nelson? No questions. Okay. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Next witness. There is no next witness. All right. Just bear with us for 1 minute.
That wasn't nice.
There's hundreds more. I'm sorry.
That wasn't nice.
How many more are there?
I don't know because some people are choosing not to testify when we call. So. Good evening and welcome. Please state your name and limit your testimony to 1 minute. Thank you and welcome.
Thank you for having me today. My name is Kerry. I currently live in Middletown, Rhode Island, and have 2 children who are in 1st and 4th grade. And I'm here today to tell you I strongly oppose House Concurrent Resolution number 7256 to extend the governor's emergency powers. My biggest concern is that we are using the state of emergency to allow for mandatory mask mandates in schools. We now have real data that shows that the risk COVID presents to children is statistically less than the flu. Children in the U.S. who are 5 to 14 years old have a 6.5 times greater chance of dying from suicide than COVID. Yes, that's for 5 to 14-year-olds. Vaccines and boosters are available to all over the age of 5, and experts have confirmed that one-way masking is protective and works. So in short, we have all the tools now. It's time to put children first. While adults are busy lunching with friends in restaurants and gathering together at bars, our children sit masked, isolated, and deprived of their favorite traditions in our schools. My 7-year-old wears a mask 8 hours a day. I notice many of you are not wearing masks today, so that's fortunate. He has lunch on the floor in a special designated spot away from his rep. The classroom is freezing with the windows and doors open. The children are forbidden to speak while eating. Then after lunch, he goes outside for recess, where he's forced to wear his mask outside as well. Let me ask you, when you had lunch today, were you allowed to speak? Did you have to wear a mask outside when you shoveled your driveway yesterday? Are the windows and doors open in the chambers today? Well, if not, I kindly ask you that you set the temperature to 55 degrees so that you can have the same experience as our children. Lastly, our children are suffering from speech delays, reading delays, learning loss, and most importantly, a lack of connection with their teachers and friends. They have carried this burden for far too long. To be clear, COVID has not created these hardships for our children. Rhode Island's policy has. Now is the time to move forward and away from fear. There is no data that supports the masking of school children. You do not have to be a trailblazer, as 36 other states have already led the way and got rid of school mask mandates. I implore you to follow these other states and end the mask mandate. I worked hard to keep this polite and respectable, but I promise you I do not feel that way inside. I'm outraged, disgusted, and furious. We, the parents of Rhode Island, will not go away. We've organized, and we will fight for our children's right to their childhood. History will now look kindly on those who choose to continue forced masking of children. You have the power to change this. Please allow the state of emergency to expire and mask mandates to become optional in school. Thank you for your time and listening.
Thank you for your testimony and passion on the subject. Any questions from members of the committee? No questions. Have a good night.
Thanks, you too.
Good evening and welcome. Please state your name and limit your testimony to 1 minute. You have the floor.
My name is Katie Hall, and I am in favor of H7217. I feel we, at this point, have done everything, and we need to start thinking of our children without masks and end all this above reach of the fee, and I am in favor. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions from members of the committee?
No.
Okay. Next witness. Good evening and welcome. You have the floor to testify. Please try to limit your testimony to 1 minute and state your name.
Hi, good evening. This is Adam from North Situate. I'm calling this evening to strongly support Resolution 7217 and 7218 and oppose 7256 for two particular reasons. The first being, it's not crystal clear to me, and I think a lot of people, that an emergency still exists with respect to the COVID-19 pandemic, and specifically at what metrics, we've been at this for over 600 days, what metrics will, once achieved, will be clear that the emergency is over and we can return to quote-unquote normal. The second is the issue of trust. From my perspective, the trust has been broken by the executive branch in a complete disregard for civil liberties throughout the management of their response to the pandemic, and quite frankly by the General Assembly because of their complete abdication of oversight. I think there's been 2 hearings on the House side, maybe 1 in the Senate. Ridiculous. You might start by earning back some of that trust from the electorate and the people of Rhode Island by ending the government by executive fiat and returning to normal. Just like the governor said it was time to get vaccinated, it's time to return to normal government here in the state of Rhode Island. I appreciate your consideration this evening. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Do members of the committee have any questions for the witness? No questions. Thank you. Have a good night. Good evening and welcome. Please state your name and limit your testimony to 1 minute. If you're there.
Mon-Friday. Are you ready?
Yeah, go ahead.
Mon-Friday. I'm strongly urging the legislature to vote for ending the mandates, or ending the emergency, state of emergency, and to not grant Governor McKee further emergency use powers. The Omicron variant has shown itself to be no different than a typical flu. The rate of hospitalizations is going down. The rate of serious ill effects from the virus are going down, and there is not a state of emergency. That can be shown scientifically, at least. So there's no need to have an emergency situation anymore. Moreover, when Governor McKee was given emergency use privileges, he did not handle those appropriately. His regulations did not lead to a curbing of the pandemic. People continued to die. The virus continued to mutate and infect people. And his emergency use powers were therefore ineffective and counterproductive. I don't see why we should give it to him again, so he can mismanage or again. So there's absolutely no reason to have an state of emergency or to give the key emergency use privileges. Thank you for considering my testimony.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Any questions from members of the committee for Mr. Brody? No questions. Have a good night.
Thank you. Bye.
Good evening and welcome. You have the floor to testify. Please state your name and try to limit your testimony to 1 minute.
Hi, my name is Robin Narkovich. I am testifying because I believe it is time to end the mandates. It's complete government overreach. It's time to allow the children to be children. So, thank you.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Any questions from members of the committee? No questions. Okay, have a good night.
Thank you.
Good evening and welcome. Please state your name and try to limit your testimony to 1 minute.
Okay, thank you. Hi, my name is Jill, and again, thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak tonight. I am just testifying that I am opposed to extending the state of emergency because there is no emergency, and I'm also opposed to the mask mandate because it's been proven that masks do not stop or slow the spread of any virus, as stated by the CDC. Also in Rhode Island, as you heard, it's been proven masks cause irreparable harm to our kids. The General Assembly is in session. There are sporting events going on in Providence. People are traveling, going on vacation, and going about their lives and conducting business as usual. We are one of the few places in the world mandating masks and still in a state of emergency. Norway, Finland, Ireland, England, and Denmark have now dropped all restrictions. And many states here in the United States have declined these restrictions, and yet we have not, and we are doing worse. So obviously the mask mandate and emergency orders do not work, and there's plenty of data to support that sentence. This is not 2020, and with all the amount of information we now have about COVID, our state should return to full normalcy ASAP. What the governor is trying to do is not supported by data or facts. And to continue with a mask mandate extending the state of emergency is pointless and definitely do more harm, especially to our children and elderly. The single most positive and powerful thing that our governor and officials could do for our state if they really cared is to bring back normalcy for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Do members of the committee have any questions of the witness? Seeing none, we'll move on to the next witness. Have a good night. Good evening and welcome. You have the floor to testify. Please state your name and try and limit your testimony to 1 minute. If you're there. Good evening.
Good evening.
Hi. Can you state your name and you have the floor to testify? Just try and limit it to 1 minute, please.
Okay. My name is Melissa Fitzgerald. I am from the town of Gloucester. I am in favor of H7217, H7218, and I am also in opposition of H7256 and F2154. I do not think that we should be having a state of emergency. I also don't think we could extend the executive